G'day and welcome to Lords of Pain Radio. I'm your host, SirSam. You can call me Sam though, that's perfectly fine. And today we're here to celebrate the announcement of the LOP In-Ring Awards for 2019 and also the End of Decade Awards. So for the final 2 weeks or so of 2019, you would have seen a survey that was pinned to the front of Lords of Pain, and you could jump in there and vote for the WWE, AEW, and also Global Wrestler of the Year Awards, Match of the Year, all of those good things, and also the Decade, the awards for the Wrestler of the Decade, the Tag Team of the Decade, and the Match of the Decade. And it's my distinct pleasure now to go through and announce the winners of this. There will be a post, of course, popped up on Lords of Pain. I'll be putting that on there. It may even be up today if you jump on there and look at it, and you'll be able to see all of the fancy graphics and all of the top fives. But today we will concentrate and announce the winners, the top threes actually, and announce the winners as well, and just a little bit of comment on there. And of course, I am joined by my partner in crime, the Implicate from Lords of Pain, as Lords of Pain Radio and Lords of Pain columnist as well. Thanks very much for jumping on, Imp. How are you going?
Thank you very much for having me on, Sam. It feels weird. It's always the other way round when we.
How'd I do with my first ever intro? Would you give me an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10? What would you rate me?
Oh no, I can't. I was about to say, that intro was fire, but no, that's topical. It's not.
Yeah, I live in Australia. For those who can't tell by the accent, saying something is fire for me right now is a bit of a touchy subject, but
yeah.
I'll let it slide.
That's why when I thought it, I was like, maybe think of something else in, but I can't now. It's too late.
Now to put you on the spot, Imp, before we get into the awards, I wanted to quickly say, if you had to sum up the world of wrestling in just a couple of words, let's say in a tweet for last year, if you had to sum it up in that, what would you put it as? What would you say?
Actually, the phrasing that I came up with for AEW's mid-card fits pretty well here, I feel like. I described it as wibbly-wobbly. So it's I have nicked that from Doctor Who. It's like time's all wibbly wobbly.
Yep. Fantastic quote from Doctor Who.
But yeah, it had massive peaks, especially WWE, like massive peaks with like best stuff they've possibly ever done in some cases, mixed with some of the absolute worst. It's such an up and down year. New Japan rebuilt. And like me and you, obviously, who are now like massive New Japan fans, they rebuilt this year. Faith in Gedo. In Gedo we trust. So that all paid off at Wrestle Kingdom as well, kind of proving the long-term dedication as well. It feels great to be gratified. Like it's nice. In terms of like elsewhere as well, Impact's rebuilding with the
ROH doing the opposite.
Yeah, ROH doing the opposite. That's what we both like, wibbly wobbly. He got one kind of rebuilding really well, and the other just sinking. With AEW as well, they're finding their footing, figuring out what they are against NXT, who has started knowing exactly what they are. So one had a massive head start compared to the other, even though AEW is winning in the ratings. In terms of actual content quality, personally, NXT is got the upper hand in that, but that's just because they've had years to figure out what their content is, what their image is, whilst AEW still doesn't really know, and it will take a couple of years, I reckon. You don't find that quickly. You just find it by doing the thing and take some time.
I agree completely with what you said there. That's a really great phrase for it, actually, wibbly wobbly. And yeah, I think you're right. I actually imagined AEW was going to be sort of like New Japan, but in America, and it totally wasn't that. It's totally not that. But I'm really enjoying AEW, and New Japan, I think, has been my number one this year. That's been my go-to. Well, we'll talk about, of course, these things more when we get to the brand of the year. But just for us personally, I guess for me, New Japan, at the start of the year, it felt weird. It was because I had been drawn into New Japan by the Elite, and so it felt so weird when they weren't there, and I was a bit nervous about the year when it was at New Beginning and there was no New Year's Dash and then New Beginning and there was no Elite, but they recovered and built up to, I reckon, greater highs than ever, particularly after Wrestle Kingdom last week.
Yeah. It's the quite a few people are feeling the wrestling fatigue from Wrestle Kingdom. Like,
Oh, yeah.
It was
A huge
massive
weekend.
this year.
It felt like a WrestleMania weekend where you've got, the big indie shows, and then you've got the NXT takeover, which is the biggest takeover of the year, and the WrestleMania. Anyway, we will have to stop dilly-dallying though, because we have lots of awards to get through. And before we get started, I do want to thank everyone who did vote. We got around about 800 votes, which is a fantastic response, and I think gives us a really good segment of the Lords of Pain audience. So I think it's pretty safe to say that we have a really good and really accurate results as to what people who read Lords of Pain really think, as a majority.
Pointing finger.
Yeah, there's a couple of awards. We'll get to one award in particular I'm not too happy about, but we'll try and we'll focus on the positives, because it's the celebrating the best of the year, and we'll get stuck in. We'll just go through the answers, I think, the way that the questions were posed. So starting out in the wrestlers of the year, so celebrating the people who stepped into the ring or who provided commentary around it, and we'll get started with the WWE Wrestler of the Year award. So that was obviously for the best wrestler of the year for WWE, and coming in third we had Becky Lynch, who got 11.3% of the vote. Coming in second was Bray Wyatt / The Fiend, who had 17.1%, and the big winner of this one, the same as the PWI Wrestler of the Year, Adam Cole, romping home with 28%. Pretty clear winner there. What do you think of that one, Imp?
I can't really disagree, especially if you go down to fourth place as well, which is Kofi Kingston. I can't really, especially on who was the most, I guess, influential for WWE in the entire year. With those four specifically, I can't think of anyone else, aside from, personally I put Daniel Bryan up there, but he was elevating others and also working with crap when it comes to the Roman Reigns storyline. But he was fantastic in that, and you can see he was giving it his all. So his year was propping up other people, and he's still doing it today with Bray Wyatt. So I can see why I'm one of those people who would nerdily look at it and the whole storytelling thing and be like, oh, Daniel Bryan's got to be up there. But then I can't argue with Becky Lynch, The Fiend, and Adam Cole. As in, all three have been so consistent all year round. Fiend, obviously, more creatively consistent than, I guess, in the ring, like Adam Cole. But that's why Adam Cole won. He had the consistency of the creative behind him, and then he was able to have amazing matches as well. He's had one of the best years overall of a NXT WWE wrestler for quite some time.
Yeah, Becky Lynch, of course, she main evented, won the Royal Rumble and then main evented WrestleMania. Probably cooled off as the year went by. I also voted Daniel Bryan, actually, but I can't begrudge the people that have been voted in here. The Fiend as well, 17%. He was red hot at one point, absolutely red hot. Bray Wyatt reinventing himself, re-debuting after Mania, and really building himself up in something that was incredibly creative and really well received. But yeah, Adam Cole, when we get to the matches of the year and the feud of the year and things like that, he's a guy that will feature very prominently. It just had an incredible year in the ring. We spoke about NXT. There's no doubt NXT is probably the most beloved brand on the WWE, and he was the centerpiece of NXT this year. So I'm not surprised by the result of this, and it's a really good reflection of how far this guy's come, from being a guy who was a big deal in Ring of Honor, but not and also featured in New Japan, but not the biggest name in the world of wrestling, to coming through, and he's a guy with the world at his feet now. So congratulations to Adam Cole, a WWE Wrestler for 2019. We'll move on to Tag Team now. So WWE Tag Team of the Year, coming in third. Actually, a close one with this, so I'll actually go with fourth. Fourth was The Revival with 12.6% of the vote. Third, the Kabuki Warriors, Asuka and Kairi Sane, 13.2%. The New Day coming in at 18.2% in its second, and coming in first, the Undisputed Era, Sweep the Pool, taking the Tag Team of the Year as well. Yeah, I wasn't surprised by this one either, honestly. As I said, NXT has been, it's the brand that people love the most, and the Undisputed Era have been the centerpiece of it for this year, and they've had some great matches as well throughout the year. What are your thoughts around that? You watch NXT a little bit more than me, Imp.
Yeah, Undisputed Era absolutely killed it. Maybe what were they called? The War Raiders, as I'm calling them. Maybe they would have been on this list if they hadn't have been called up in the middle of the crazy, we're going to promise to be good now, version 0.3. They did 5 resets this year. which is kind of mental. So they were kind of slowly building and ready to kind of take that mantle a bit from Undisputed Era. The only one I would say from NXT UK, grizzled young veterans have been amazing. We'll see that this weekend on NXT UK, which I keep forgetting is happening because I'm not able to watch it live, so it's not in my figurings out.
Yeah, sadly, NXT UK didn't get a whole lot of a look in the votes. And it's probably, last year I was a massive fan of 205 Live, and 205 Live, the performers from that got no votes in the voting last year. I was very sad about that. But NXT UK, this is, a similar sort of thing. It's just not, one of the more prominent brands. I think one thing from this I'd like to highlight would be the Kabuki Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
Asuka and Kairi Sane, they were, after Asuka lost the championship, well, even after she won it at Royal Rumble, she was a non-factor in the women's division. And Kairi Sane as well was nowhere to be seen on the main roster. And those guys have they've carved out a really great niche for themselves. They are in feature positions. They main evented the TLC pay-per-view, and with those belts on them, they might not be the top of the card, and that might not be where people would really love to see Asuka in particular. I think that a lot of people would love to see her right up the top of the women's singles division, but you know what? Those guys were not on TV. They were not featured, and now they are. So props to them, and well-deserved coming in third. They were actually my pick for the tag team of the year, personally.
I can't remember if I went with New Day or Undisputed Era, but that's first and second. I went with one of them.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean the New Day, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we need to say a whole lot. Just service as usual from those guys. Wildly entertaining, really good matches, and the bonus of, obviously this is talking about tag teams, but you can't remove what happened with Kofi Kingston completely from the equation when it comes to the New Day.
Yeah, and with the Kabuki Warriors as well, it's one of those where the titles, after the WrestleMania match, the titles were kind of the consensus was, this isn't going to last long, is it? These are going to be immediately forgotten about. They don't care about immediately was the feeling when they went on to the Iconics. Sorry, Iconics. It's just too high. And then as well after WrestleMania, because we had Asuka had an amazing match with Becky Lynch at the Royal Rumble. I've just rewatched it because I'm refreshing myself for, because it's Royal Rumble season, and as writers, we're meant to remember things, and I've not rewatched a lot of this decade, so I don't remember stuff. But yeah, so after that point, Asuka was, with the main event of WrestleMania, Asuka was the person that fell victim to it. She was the piece forgotten about, tossed to the side for the other stuff. And after WrestleMania, it didn't get any better. It was even more forgotten about. Kairi Sane got called up, and it was yet another NXT call-up where they had no plans for her. So she's done everything she can in NXT, but there was no plans on the main roster, so she got called up and then vanished. The Kabuki Warriors, they started off as with the Page stuff, and that was, cause I can't remember if that was after the wild card or if that was during the wild card, or because that summer was so crazy. It was kind of I can forgive them not booking Kairi Sane or coming up with stuff for them, because they can't even be consistent with their main stuff. So whilst that is crazy, I'm a little bit forgiving. The summer for me was so random that it felt like Kofi Kingston's reign had only just started by the time the summer was over, because it was so chaotic. It was like it'd been filler all the entire time, and then we just came back to the main story. But technically, he's been champion the entire time. So it's But so when Kairi Sane and Asuka came back, whenever it was, for me, it's when they went to Raw. So when they did that whole thing, and you've got the distinct two different shows. October, that was it. Yeah, when they did that 5th soft reset in October, and the Kabuki Warriors came back. They turned on Paige. They became heel, and slowly they changed their image. Now they've got their "we're baddie foreigners" kind of stuff, but it works. It's really, really good. I'm not going to ignore.
But they're not baddie foreigners. Like you might say. I don't know, a stereotype from the early 90s or late 80s is there. They've got some edge to them. They're they Kairi Sane wears a cap, wears the belt around her neck. Asuka has the point. They've got some swagger, and I really like the Kabuki Warriors, and I'm really happy for those guys, and it's good for the belts as well. As as much as I love the Iconics because they come from my country, you're right. They did nothing with the belts. They really and these guys, the Kabuki Warriors, are doing what what they originally probably should have been doing for all summer, which is on Bayley and Sasha Banks, which has been, really great workers who can put on a great match with anyone. So yeah, but props. Ultimately, as I said, the Undisputed Era tag team of the year. They're just so good. Yeah. Anyway, moving along, we do need to keep going, otherwise we're going to be here forever. WWE Non-Wrestling Personality of the Year. Now, with this one, for all of the non-wrestling personalities, I do like to put the description on this. I don't want to get in the habit of talking about outside of the actual wrestling. So this isn't to do with like the media, for example, or people who have podcasts, like in the outside of AEW and WWE. I don't want people voting for Dave Meltzer or Mr. Tito or even myself. Like I want it to be the commentators, the referees, the mouthpieces, the people who add the intangibles. And I think if we look at the top three, we've got a really great cross section of that. So we've got Renee Young came in third with 13.5. Was the commentator on Raw for a while and then took on as the host of Backstage. Paul Heyman, the mouthpiece for the Beast, Brock Lesnar, 20.1% of the vote, and winning it is Mauro Ranallo, who was also my pick on 25%. I love these results, and I love that Mauro Ranallo took it out with that getting a quarter of all of the votes, 24.3%, sorry. He just adds such a big fight feel to the NXT calls. It's so different to the what I'd call the main roster commentaries, and it's very fitting that in the top 5 of this there's no existing main roster commentators that have been ranked. Michael Cole doesn't get votes in this, and I think it's Mauro Ranallo is so beloved because he is who he is. He is a guy who has a big combat sports background. He called Pride. He's called lots of massive boxing fights, and he brings that experience and that gravitas to the NXT main event. And I think I think it's underrated, even though he's getting props. It's underrated how much he adds to those really well heralded NXT main events. So I'm really happy that he came in first here. What are your thoughts on the top 3 there, Imp?
So even though I voted for Renee, because again, she's the evolve she's
best interviewer. I reckon she's the best interviewer in wrestling. Yeah,
she, as in you can tell when she first arrived, within like the first couple of months, you're like, she gets it. Like, yes, yes.
Yeah, she's not one of the the stereotypical robo backstage people for the WWE. She has been able to inject her personality into that.
Yeah, like even Charlie Caruso, who I would say Charlie Caruso seemingly also gets it, but she's got a lot more, I guess, America TV presenter traits about her, which as a foreigner, some of those tweak it, they hurt, they feel apparent a little bit, but Renee Young, she's so natural at it that it just feels like an actual conversation rather than I'm here presenting type of thing that Charlie Caruso does. But yeah, and I actually liked her on commentary. Like it became a thing on, like you saw it on Twitter and lots of comments on LOP itself of Renee Young's commentary was they didn't like it. She turned into the commentator, and I was like, what do you mean turned into? That third role, whoever is in it. That's what they do. Renee's no different because she's being told what to say. So I never understood that criticism. Like, she doesn't say anything. That's not her fault. So, again, I'm being a bit more nerdy, kind of like understanding the actual production behind it. I thought she did a really good job. And it's not her fault in terms of the way they produce commentary. I
think she also suffered badly when she first jumped on the desk with the Dean Ambrose heel turn,
yes.
Because for whatever reason, for some insane reason, they decided to include her in that, and she didn't know what to say, and it looked really bad.
Yeah, totally
it was a really black mark on her early, and I think that's partly stuck, unfortunately. But as you can see, like, she got 14% of the vote. So obviously people have moved on from that, or at least appreciate the other skills that she brings.
Yeah.
And, Paul Heyman is Paul Heyman. I feel like I've heard his one promo about
I skipped them
1,000 times.
I skip them now.
There's no doubt that people love what he does. And I think also part of the fact that Raw has, Raw seems to be the main roster well, I don't know, his NXT main roster now. Out of SmackDown and Raw, Raw seems to have done a really good job at sort of booking itself into a bit of a good space, and I think Paul Heyman's probably attracted a bit of the vote for that, if I'm being truthful, even though people aren't meant to be voting about that according to the categories that I lay out. But yeah, congratulations to Mauro Ranallo. Mamma mia, he won it. And so he gets the non-wrestling personality of the year. Now, the next one up, WWE Rookie of the Year. This was the most dominant of all of the votes across their thing, and I don't think anyone is going to have to think about it too hard at all to work out who gets it. And it's quite fitting that this particular performer who wins this is a dominant wrestler in general. I will go from the bottom. So Angel Garza. I actually don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. 7%.
Angel.
Angel Garza, yeah. Humberto Carrillo came in with 20.3%. The high flyer. He's made a really good spot for himself, and it's great that's happened. But 54% of the vote, over half of the vote, the most dominant, the highest percentage of any of the votes that we have. In these voting, coming in first is Volta. He debuted at the end of NXT UK Blackpool. He immediately punted Joe Coffey over the over the ropes. Did a face-off with Pete Dunne. His first takeover match, he won the UK Championship in what I thought at the time was one of the matches of the weekend at WrestleMania opposite Pete Dunne, and he has just gone from strength to strength. He even managed to get a main roster feature position in Survivor Series and was part of that really well received Survivor Series elimination match. This is a guy who has the world at his feet and absolutely deserving winner of Rookie of the Year. Tell me about Walter. What are you scared of him as I am?
Well, I've had time to get used to him from the European scene. And for me, because it was quite interesting watching Imperium, like the whole stable around Walter kind of form and debut. Because like we were kind of like us nerdy people, like me and Miz fan, we were like, wouldn't it be kind of cool if Ring Camp were in NXT? that'll be so cool. And then Imperium formed, which pretty much is Ring Camp. It's the same stable from WXW in Germany. They've just done the exact same gimmick, the exact same thing, but it's really, really good. So I'm in that boat of I'm really happy seeing people get excited over something that I thought was great, but because it was in an indie in Germany, so many people just didn't care. And now Miz fan can feel I've forgotten the word, but he can feel good. He can feel happy, feel good that he wasn't wasting words by talking about how fantastic the Ring Camp stable was in WXW, because they've done the exact same thing in NXT UK, and now the wider world knows about it. It's
funny.
Yeah.
Miz Fan is a guy on in the columns forum, and also does the Global Revolution, and he was one of the presenters for All Elite. All About All Elite earlier this year. He is a guy who is constantly ahead of the curve. He told me about Walter at the end of 2017. He was blogging a lot about Walter in his top matches for 2017. It's at least a year ahead of the curve. And same with I was twittering about Shingo Takagi earlier this year, and he was like, "Yeah, Shingo was great in Dragon Gate. I'm glad he's finally getting his props." Just another wrestler that Miz Fan was ahead of the curve on. So the thing I like about Walter, though, for me, just to talk specifically about him, is there's a lot of big men out there that they get pops and things by doing flips, and and that's a certain criticism I'd level at wrestling sometimes nowadays. You have small men wrestling like big men and big men wrestling like high flyers, and Walter is nothing like that. I love that Walter is he is a brute. Everything about him is big and powerful, and even when he does what would potentially be like a high flying move, so like a shotgun drop kick, for example, or a frog splash, he does it with such weight and force and in such an inelegant way that it looks perfect. Like his shotgun drop kicks look like cannons. They look like they would send you absolutely hurtling out of the ring. And I love that about him. I love that he is big, he is lumbering, and he has just a huge presence about him, and it makes his matches better for it, because he has that presence, he has that feeling about him of weight to everything he does.
Yes, 100%. And I didn't really talk about his actual WWE run that much. Yes, what you just said, he's been so damn dominant. It's been an absolute joy to watch him when he's popped up. NXT UK and 205 Live have both fallen off my watch list. Like, with the current schedule, with AEW as well, like, when the hell am I going to watch this stuff? Like, I can't watch it all.
Stop watching Raw and SmackDown, Imp.
Yeah, Ricky from Ricky and Clive Show told me, yeah, you can drop SmackDown, like, within my first month. I was just, yeah, they can drop that. But, yeah, I don't have the time, like, especially with the column as well. Like, the only way I could fit it in is dropping the column. Because that, like, you know this, like, I don't know if people realise how much time penning these columns takes. Like, it's not a quick bash out your brain kind of thing. Yeah. Like, we're talking hours here to get especially something as long as the stuff that
words.
Like me and you recently, we're just putting out 4,000 word stuff as well. So we're not doing tiny things. We are putting out quite long columns. They take quite a long time to put together. So there's no way in hell I have any time for 205 Live or NXT UK. I make time for the New Japan bigger shows. I don't have time for the Road 2s anymore, which kind of sucks because I used to check them out at some point. But no, it's keeping it strong style. They'll tell me about the Road 2s. But that means I've not seen as much Walter as I would like. But I have watched him, obviously, every time he's been on NXT, every time he's popped up on a takeover. But I know him already. So he's not somebody where I needed to be sold on his character, because I already know it from PWG, from WXW, from Progress. So I know how good he is. And to see him top this list is humbling my heart. Even if we know the real rookie of the year is Shota Umino. But Walter, yeah.
Shota. Good old shooter. Anyway, we'll have to move along. Changing promotions now. As I said, we're talking wrestlers. At the moment, we will get back to WWE and talk matches and feuds in a tick. But AEW Wrestler of the Year. This was another one that was pretty clear cut, really. Coming in third, you had Cody Rhodes with 12% of the vote. That was low, considering I thought he would snag more potentially. Second, Jon Moxley, 20.7%. And no surprise to see Le Champion coming in first, 45.7%. A lot of people had questions about Jericho going in, being, the first champion for this new promotion. I think every single one of them he has answered. He has been in career best form almost. I didn't see him live. I've watched a lot of his old matches. I didn't see him live going through. I think this run is some of the best work that he has ever done. Putting younger guys over and having some amazing feuds with Cody and also Kenny Omega earlier this year. It's easy to forget that one. That was the first main event for AEW. And then, of course, this one that's been building with Jon Moxley, who came in second. Your thoughts on the AEW results, Imp?
Really can't argue. It's one of those where I think about who really was the best, and I'm kind of with you that I feel like Cody might have had a bit more of the vote if
he won the championship.
Maybe I was also thinking
if he'd beaten Chris Jericho, I think he would have probably done a bit more.
Yeah, I'd say also LOP is still pretty WWE first. So I wouldn't be surprised if the other two got the bigger votes just because they're more recent WWE names. Cody, that's kind of what I think. But I also can't argue as well, because the way that they've booked themselves, like the folk like Kenny Omega, they've purposely booked themselves to struggle and be broke. Like the idea of the elite being broken down to then later being built back up, but they're now. They've been broken down, and they're now in the place of what are the consequences of that? Because they're telling a story long term. It's not broken down and then team huddle and then bring back up. Like, no, it's not an American football movie. Like, no, it's long term storytelling, like we've seen with New Japan, where they've been broken down. They don't just bounce back; they now face the consequences of that struggle. But that also means that they are not putting out like constant matches of the year, because the story is they are not on peak form. which is it's really weird. I'm not sure creatively whether I agree or not. Long term, they are hopefully going to that place where it will get a massive pop and they will return to a peak, and it builds everybody else around them in the meantime. But obviously, that means they've not started off on the hottest foot. It's a weird one. I don't really know how to assess it.
The way that I see it is they've used Jericho and Moxley very well.
Oh yeah.
Because I guess at the moment they're building their audience. They're trying to get attention from people who previously either didn't watch, have either fallen off the WWE bandwagon, watched WWE, or have completely fallen out of wrestling. Us diehards love Kenny Omega. We know who he is. We love the Young Bucks. We know who they are. Even Cody, to a degree, his last name carries a lot of weight in the industry. But the two biggest guys they've got, the two, most well-known people they've had who've been in the highest position in the biggest wrestling organization in the world, Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho, they have been at the forefront of the early shows. That shows in the voting here. It shows in, who's getting championships, who's getting big segments. And I think they're using those guys to bring them in. Look, hopefully, I love the Elite. I hope that this is a plan for a bigger story involving the Elite. And I hope that, these guys like Kenny Omega get introduced to a larger audience, because at his peak, there's no one that wrestles in the world like Kenny Omega. And he hasn't really had a chance to demonstrate that as much, I don't feel like, this year as he did, say in 2018 as in New Japan or even before then. But I think bust out a little bit of the bubbly. Chris Jericho, yes. 45.7%. Who would have thought that he would be doing so well? He is nearly 50 years old, and he is one of the best wrestlers in the world right now. That's absolutely phenomenal by him. Continues to reinvent himself at an age where most wrestlers seem to be pretty happy to just cruise along with what they've always done. So great job, Chris Jericho. Deserved winner here. Moving to the tag team of the year, which was an interesting one for me. There was 3 big names in this one, and they all traded the lead at a different point. Coming in third, and I think this is an absolute upset, the Young Bucks, 19.7%. They came in third, despite being EVPs of the company and probably the most heralded tag team going into AEW. They ended up third here. Coming in second, the Lucha Brothers, 25.7% of the vote, and just pipping the Lucha Brothers is the inaugural AEW Tag Team Champions, SCU, taking that out. What do you think of this, Imp? Is this an upset?
I'm not really sure, because again, SCU are the tag team champions. They have been having really good matches. I assumed it would be SCU, Lucha Brothers, or Young Bucks. With as well, Young Bucks haven't had. They've had the matches with Lucha Brothers were obviously insane, and they had their kind of brawl with Santana Ortiz, which was like a really fun opener. But again, they've not been going over. The story is that they have been losing, and I wouldn't be surprised if the fact they are EVPs kind of fits into this a little bit, because there is also that narrative of AEW only exists for the Elite to put themselves over. So I wouldn't be surprised if people don't vote for them because of that, even though evidence proves otherwise. As I've just said, the other reason they're not getting votes properly is because they're not putting themselves over. Which is kind of, they're purposely breaking themselves down to build everyone else. But, the end game is they'll hopefully be more over because of it in the long term. So maybe I wouldn't be surprised. But SEU are definitely deserving. They have been fantastic. Yep. I'm trying to think of before AEW as well, how hot they were on the Indies in Ring of Honor. They were putting on amazing work, all 3 of them. They're like the trusted veterans of the division, and they're such a wise, like Chris Jericho, I guess, for the title scene, like a really trusted champion to start everything off and build around.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So the Lucha Brothers and the Young Bucks have probably had the most high-profile matches out of the tag team division, but the SCU, they were the tag teams that kicked off AEW. The Double or Nothing, of course, there was the buy in the pre-show. The SCU kicked it off though, and they have been the anchor of the tag team division. They've been at the center of the tag team division, putting over other teams, but also they're the inaugural champions, making sure that the division is built up in a really solid way. They're not the most spectacular team. I really rate Scorpio Sky, but Frankie Kazarian and Christopher Daniels' high-flying days, real high-flying days, are somewhat behind them, but they are just absolute veterans who know exactly what to do, how to get it done in the ring. And I think, a great deserved winners here, deserved winners of the championship, great anchors of the division. And of course, we should probably mention the Lucha Brothers. They've been a really exciting team to sort of see, and I'd really like to see them actually not feature at all in the tag team of the year next year, maybe in the singles division, but that's for 2020, not for 2019. So congratulations, SCU, moving along. To AEW non-wrestling personality of the year. This one not so surprising, but given the LOP demographic.
I didn't even see Jake Hager on the nominees. That's why I was just laughing because he's on a non-wrestling personality.
Yeah, so this was really close actually. So I'll actually go from fifth. So with 11.2% of the vote, Excalibur. Aubrey Edwards came in with 12.8% of the vote. Jake Hager scraped 13.7%, so the former Jack Swagger. Tony Schiavone, 13.9%. Splitting second and fourth was 8 votes. So when I say every vote counted, when I was tweeting out all that stuff saying get your votes in, every vote counts, I was not joking. There was 8 votes splitting fourth and second in this one. But coming in first, it's good old JR. No surprise here. Kind of like Mauro Ranallo was saying with Mauro Ranallo in NXT. I think JR lends a big main event feel to AEW. He's copped his share of criticism, some of it right, some of it probably wrongly. But when it comes to the main events, when it comes to the big matches, Jim Ross just lends such an air of authority, of gravitas, and just knows how to get a main event over, knows how to anchor a show. He was the perfect person for AEW to get. They could not have got a better person to helm the commentary booth for their first stretch on TV.
Oh yeah, totally agree. In terms of the commentary booth, they're such a. If it's weird, it feels like a step up from WWE in terms of like the actual talent they've got and the way that the commentary works. Obviously, they're working out the kinks because AEW is still figuring out what they want. Never mind the commentators figuring out how they gel together. So I wouldn't be surprised if every week they're getting new ideas thrown at them for how they're meant to gel. So again, that wouldn't surprise me. But of course, there is the looseness as well. Compared to WWE, like the reason the main commentators get on your nerves is not their skill, because Michael Cole, when he's not had someone in his ear, he's really good. There's a reason he's had this position. But on Raw, he's unbearable. On SmackDown, he's unbearable. That's not his fault. AEW has a lot looser production. It has its pros, it has its cons. JR is a fantastic example of that. And as the anchor with so much experience, he works really, really well. Obviously, the biggest con being he doesn't know what to say when commentating Japanese female wrestlers. He struggles so much.
He's put his foot in with just women in general. He's put his foot in a couple of times. Because he's been commentating for so long, for so many decades. Obviously, it makes sense that certain ways of describing things will become more used than others. And obviously now he can't use a lot of those, so he's kind of like with Riho, he picked that 95 pounds and he's stuck to that.
Yeah.
Every time she does something, 95 pounds, 95 pounds, 95 pounds. Just sticks to that. That's a safe road to travel down.
Yeah. You're not going to accidentally make a racism or misogyny. No, stick with the weight.
One of the things that I love about... Sorry, keep going.
I was going to say, personally, I think their best get is Excalibur. Again, he's somebody who I've heard of commentary beforehand with PWG, which was his company. And I've said it before, him and Chuck Taylor, or Chucky T, from Best Friends, those two on commentary together, when it happens, they are dangerous. They are. Watch Battle of Los Angeles from like the middle of this decade, where those two are doing commentary for it. It's so funny. It's so entertaining. I don't know if they'd had that freedom, but yeah. But Excalibur for me is their biggest get, especially as he's the one who distances the feel of commentary from WWE. he's the one who really makes it feel different, and his knowledge as well is a massive get. Not just wrestling, but also culture, as in the video games world, like where JR especially is, what is this bollocks? It's kind of like, this is amazing. And of course, he's the one who knows all of the wrestlers, which is also proving as a bit of a con, where, like we saw this
He's
week,
learning a little bit how to do things.
Yeah.
Like the introduction of the he's improving though. Like the introduction of the Butcher and the Blade. Oh my god, he absolutely fluffed that. But now this week with the Japanese death match wrestler, I've completely Luther.
Yeah.
He didn't immediately jump to his name.
Yeah.
You could kind of tell he knew who it was, but he didn't immediately say his name, which was, it's a start. And I think
it's a step. Yeah.
Jim Ross potentially taking him under his wing. Obviously, Excalibur is a fantastic commentator, but just going to final finishing school with Jim Ross, he long term, I think you bang on there. And also shout outs to Aubrey Edwards. She was my pick. She is the best referee in the game at the moment. But we've got to move on. So I had to make a decision this year. Previously, we've done WWE and non-WWE, which seemed to fit when WWE was the only real giant organization. With AEW coming along, I decided to split WWE and AEW, and then I just lumped everything else in under global/indie. Of course, there's some much bigger companies. New Japan is owned by a multi-billion-dollar company in Japan. And it's going up against indie shows that are owned by, gosh knows. But we've got to stop somewhere. So we've gone global/indie wrestler of the year. Coming in third, this was fantastic. I did not expect this, but fantastic nonetheless. Tessa Blanchard, 9.4%. Coming in second, Will Ospreay, 11.9%. And then coming in first place, my boy, Jon Moxley, 24.8%. Yes. I'll be honest, this may be a tad unearned. This may be a tad on his, knowing on his brand name, but, I'm not going to argue about it. When he announced that he was leaving WWE, it was incredibly crushing. For those who don't know how if you're listening to LOP, but I'm a massive Jon Moxley / Dean Ambrose fan. He's been my favorite wrestler since Daniel Bryan got injured in 2014, and hearing he was leaving was brutal. Really, really rough. But then the minute he was out, he released that movie, and he has been on a tear since. I think at one point he was probably the hottest wrestler in the world. After he announced that he was leaving, he turned up at AEW Double or Nothing, and then middle of the week he did that podcast with Chris Jericho, and then finished the week fighting Juice Robinson at Best of Super Juniors. That was one of my favorite times as a wrestler. As a wrestling fan. And Moxley has been amazing in New Japan. He's had fantastic matches all through the G1, and then surprised everyone showing up in the Road to Wrestle Kingdom. At the end of the World Tag League to face off against Lance Archer at Wrestle Kingdom earlier this week. Last week now. But also coming in second, Will Ospreay, of course, had a phenomenal year as a wrestler, and Tessa Blanchard. I honestly haven't watched any Impact, but this was a nice surprise.
Yeah, so my views on the list. Jon Moxley had an amazing year, especially before he went to AEW. He did some really great stuff on the Indies as well. A match with Darby Allin did the round, so he was he was having a fantastic year. His G1 run was fantastic. He really established himself in there. But no, no way. He's nowhere near my top three. Which to me, that says more about how fantastic this year has been. And it also says to me, most people who voted this just didn't watch. They just didn't watch it. And so for me, Will Ospreay being second, for me, yes, 100%. If he's not number one, he's number two. For me, he's number one. He had not just a phenomenal year, but one of the best years of this decade entirely. And I'm talking like the consistency of Hiroshi Tanahashi saving the company. Kazuchika Okada's amazing title run. Legendary title run, which makes him, for me, spoilers later on for my opinions for the decade results. But he's, so high. For me, Will Ospreay had the best year out of everybody. It's mostly because of in-ring consistency. It wasn't just throwing out match of the year contenders every now and then. Like Best of Super Juniors, like every single match of his was like 4.5 and above, which is mental. That consistency is insane. Then he went to G1 Climax and again, pardon the pun, elevated himself even more along with Shingo. It was amazing. And of course, he started off this year, which technically doesn't count, but he had the amazing match of Hero Move to kind of cap it all off as well. For me, he feels like an absolutely massive star, like currently in the making as well. So for me, it's no question that Will Ospreay is number one. Tessa Blanchard is right up there as well, 100% deserved. She's been amazing. Credit to Sami Callihan as well, has been the counterpart. He's been the vicious heel to every amazing babyface pop she's gotten, kind of thing. He's playing a massive part in that. He's one of my heels of the year, but I've got to give that one to Jay White. But he's really helped Tessa Blanchard get to that next level of feeling like a main eventer who should win the championship. And for me, that says everything. It's still in this age, I don't feel like it's actually shifted where fans are like, no, intergender wrestling is what it should be. There's massive pushback. But Tessa Blanchard is achieving it so well, and she's doing it so well, that it's like, no, she needs to win the title. Like, that proves
and
isn't it awesome
that Global Indie Wrestler of the Year, third Tessa Blanchard, WWE Wrestler of the Year, third Becky Lynch. It's just, if you told me at the start of the decade what would happen for women's wrestling, knockout, there was, of course, in the Indies and in Japan, women's wrestling has always been a big deal and it's always been well done. But in the WWE, for the way that they've come, that is absolutely one of the best stories of the decade, is how far women's wrestling has come in terms of acceptance across the broader fan base, and also the women going out there and becoming the biggest stars in different companies that they're in. Like Tessa Blanchard, she's arguably the biggest star in Impact. I don't watch a lot of Impact, but I know that she is one of the biggest stars they've got. So props to Tessa Blanchard, props to Will Ospreay, props to Shingo Takagi, who got my vote. But congratulations, Jon Moxley. You won't get any arguments from me about that 24.8% global / indie wrestler of the year. Dean Ambrose goes rogue. And moving along to tag team of the year, coming in third, we've got Villain Enterprise, 14.1%. Global Indie Tag Team of the Year, that is. Coming in second, Gorillas of Destiny with 16.7%. And coming in first, the Briscoes with 26.5%. Tell me about the Briscoes. I haven't watched a lot of their stuff this year.
Personally, I kind of feel like, especially in America and Japan as well, it was a pretty weak year for tag teams. There wasn't really much. There's not really much buzz around the tag team scene, really.
No,
the most
I tend to agree.
Like the most it got was when it was Dunkzilla and the other guy
outside of AEW.
Yeah, what's Dunk? It's Dunkzilla and who's the other guy? Oh, Fletcher. That's it. I can't remember their actual tag team name. It's pretty bad. The Aussie Open. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, when Aussie Open won the
Rev,
when they won the Rev Pro title, and then tournament with circumstances, and then they challenged whoever the champions were. It'll be God, obviously. Champions all year, Matt. You get this. So, for me, that was kind of like, that's when it felt the hottest. And then around that time as well, you had the Birds of Prey forming, and they were Will Ospreay and Robbie Eagles joining forces with Robbie Eagles, turning on Bullet Club, joining Chaos, forming the Birds of Prey, having amazing matches. I want to say the peak one was against ELP and Ishimori, I want to say. And amazing
They
match.
came in fourth for the record, 13.7%, just behind Villain Enterprise.
And for me, WWE has had the best year. Well, WWE and AEW, they have presented the best tag team wrestling. The indie scene is the thing that's paid the price. I've not felt much buzz at all. Again, I'm not as glued in, though. So I know there is stuff there. I know Rich, the boys on One Nation Radio, where they talk about some tag teams, like they are like people who are going to be the hottest thing. But this year, there wasn't really much. And for me, the Briscoes winning is more. It's more like a thank you.
They're a name.
Like a thank you championship reign at the end of the career.
Yep.
Where it's just like it's more like recognition.
The Gorillas of Destiny, I'll give them a shout out for doing what they could with the New Japan belts. They didn't have a lot of challenges in New Japan. New Japan's tag teams division this year has been completely barren except for those guys. It's basically been those guys and whoever else gets thrown in there. They did what they could with, cutting promos and things like that. And they had some barn burners against the Briscoes from all accounts. I haven't seen them myself. Villain Enterprise, of course, have got such a strong branding, such a strong name. PCO and Brody King, Marty Scurll, and Flip Gordon. They're the four biggest stars in Ring of Honor without doubt, and easily the biggest faction in Ring of Honor without doubt. God knows why Marty Scurll wasn't the Ring of Honor champion at some point this year. We won't get into that though. But yeah, I'm happy for the Briscoes here. Congratulations, they well-worn veterans of the American and global indie circuit. Great for them. Congratulations to all these guys, but I think you're right ultimately. Moving along, I don't really want to spend a lot of time on this one. Global/indie non-wrestling personality of the year. I'll go over the results and we'll give a quick, just a summary, I guess. I'll just talk through it. So Josh Matthews came in third. Actually, I'll chuck fourth in because I love it. Fourth was Red Shoes Odo, New Japan referee, 9.4%. Josh Matthews came in third, 11.3%. Of course, Impact commentator. Don Callis, Impact commentator, former New Japan commentator by the seams of it. Now 16.9%. And winning it, NWA commentator Jim Cornette. Now, I did put a thing on this that this is about what happens in the promotions, and there's no doubt that Jim Cornette is an amazing color commentator, which just makes it really sad that we have to put a star against his name and say we don't want to talk about him because he has proven to be a really despicable human, to be honest. And he's an amazing commentator. I really wish he would apologize for the things that he has said, but the more he's dug his heels in, the more that it has told me about the kind of person he is. And I don't want to see him in this again next year. But, this is a fan voted. So congratulations, Jim Cornette, 25.3% of the vote. Did you want to say anything there, Imp, or should I move along?
I feel like I'd rather take the... There are reasons people have voted for Jim Cornette. None of them will have anything to do with this year, personally.
Yep.
But also...
I think a lot of them have got to do with the wrong reasons as well, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
There'd be... Not everyone would say that. As I said, he's a fantastic commentator. Probably the best color commentator in wrestling. But... Yeah.
I'd rather. There's a few names I do want to shout out, like outside. Yep. Just like I feel like more names deserve recognition, but this is also kind of showing me that it's the WWE bubble of LOP in a way. Obviously, it's like I was really nervous, but behind the scenes stuff. I was really nervous to start posting New Japan stuff, which is why I came up with an idea when I first started on the main page. Of I'd do a really happy, positive column talking about Raw and then slowly go into madness with the sheer awful quality of the show and then jump to something else. So I was kind of nervous, but then circumstances changed, so I jumped to New Japan and wrote about Wrestle Kingdom that same month. So I kind of ripped the band-aid off, ripped the plaster off, just to do it. Just because LOP is, for me, because I wasn't watching during the Monday Night Wars, LOP has always been WWE and end of. Now and then you'd see indie posts, but they didn't get many views to the point where the indie posts stopped. And they've been a WWE-centric news site for so long that it doesn't surprise me that the kind of wider wrestling world isn't really, by the people who visit the site, isn't really kind of been accepted yet. So I kind of felt like my kind of goal was to push other wrestling companies by just talking about them. Hopefully, to get onto the news feeds and things, and that happened. I'm so happy that it's like LOP is now wrestling. It's not just WWE.
It's very true.
And I don't know if I was part of that, but
I think that's also broadly more reflective of the world of wrestling in general over the last decade. It's WWE's stranglehold, even notwithstanding AEW's rise. WWE's stranglehold on the industry and news and the culture has certainly slipped over the last decade. There's even without AEW, there was a lot more coverage of things outside of it over the last decade than before.
So, a couple of shout-outs. First, Tiger Hattori, bloody hell.
Amen.
He retired this, I think he was either retired at Wrestle Kingdom or I can't remember.
New Japan referee.
Yeah.
Yep.
An absolute legend in New Japan world. So he's retired. He also did a little bit of commentary on one of the US tours, and I loved him. I don't know if he was good, but I loved him. So a shout out to him. Also, I guess the other two commentators in King Gino and Chris Charlton as well. Both. Oh, Rocky.
Yep.
I've got to say Rocky as well. All three of them have been really good all year, and Wrestle Kingdom to me is like, proof to me a four-man booth can work when each person has a distinct role and purpose for being there.
Yep.
So really, all of those, so shout-outs there. Kevin Kelly got votes on here, he came 5th, so shout-outs to him as well, like one of the best in terms of what New Japan, the way they tell their story, Kevin Kelly is perfect. It's just such a perfect fit. Also, I don't know. I want to say this counts, but Jim Smallman, the man behind Progress Wrestling, or one of the men behind Progress Wrestling, he's now stepped away from Progress Wrestling to move to greater pastures. As in, with Progress's ties to WWE, it doesn't take a massive leap to figure out what that means. So it's a huge gamble on his part, obviously. But yeah, he's moving on to a greater part. So a shout out to him for all of the work he's done with Progress over the course of the years. Obviously, like the biggest casualty as of late, the UK scene is not fine. As in, so many promotions have closed. But even Progress Wrestling isn't as hot as it was. But kudos to the fact that WWE were even interested. We owe a lot to Jim Smallman in terms of that happening. Because the names you've got out there, he's put in so much work.
The fact that WWE felt the need to come in and kill everything off means that something good was probably happening.
Yeah. Just talk to Leaf, talk to Ryan. He'll tell you. Yeah. Everything.
Let's keep moving, Imp. I love those shout outs and heartily endorse all the New Japan commentary booth as well. Best booth in wrestling in my mind. But moving along. We're on to the matches, so we're at a third of the way through. WWE singles matches of the year. Coming in third, Adam Cole versus Johnny Gargano, 2 out of 3 falls at TakeOver Toronto. Got 12.5% of the vote. Coming in second, Adam Cole versus Johnny Gargano, TakeOver New York, 2 out of 3 falls. Got 13.8%. Coming in first, Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania. Look, there's two things I'd say about this. Firstly, if Adam Cole and Johnny Gargano hadn't split the vote over three matches, they would have got something like 34% of the vote, easily would have won. Unfortunately, they split their vote, so fans of Adam Cole and Johnny Gargano couldn't pick what they had, and so Kofi Kingston and Daniel Bryan won, and that made me extraordinarily happy because this was one of the great WrestleMania moments. WrestleMania over the last few years has been a bit rough, let's be honest, and this was such an amazing thing to happen at WrestleMania. Everything that's represented, from all of the racial stuff, with Kofi Kingston being the first African-born wrestler to win the WWE Championship, only the second African-American wrestler to win the WWE Championship after The Rock, to the fact that Daniel Bryan was in a WrestleMania Championship match in 2019. Who would have thought that would be possible at all when he retired in 2015? Through to, I guess, Kofi Kingston again, finally getting a chance to take what probably should have happened to him, 5-6 years ago. He probably should have been in this kind of spot 5 or 6 years ago, but wasn't for various creative reasons. But he tripped and stumbled into a gauntlet match and made it work, and props to the WWE for jumping on that fire and following it through, because this was the best story of the first half of the year in wrestling, and the best story at WrestleMania, and one of the great WrestleMania moments and WrestleMania matches ever.
Not really much more to add. This was my match of the year. I'm assuming it was your match of the year as well.
For WWE, absolutely. Yep.
Like, no question. It's easily their match of the year. Nothing came close. Like, no one. For me, it's not just the match itself, which was. It doesn't hurt that the match itself was like wrestled perfectly, like beat for beat. Everything was exactly what it needed to be, and of course they nailed the execution as well. So whoever was the agent for that match, if it wasn't Daniel Bryan, just like well done, amazing. But also the story. Like the story was again almost so rare for WWE for them to almost beat for beat absolutely nail it. There was a point where it was like, oh, another gauntlet match. But
even that moment where the Usos came down and were like, "We already respect you. We'll forfeit." That was amazing. Anyway,
but it was they absolutely nailed it as well. It was when Vince McMahon came out, it wasn't an unnecessary. It wasn't a like side thing to try and make it interesting. It was the right beat to play at that moment as well. Like the way they told the story was just fantastic, and they all fed into the match as well. It was so damn well done. It's just a shame that WWE afterwards fell into wild nonsense. So Kofi's run never really felt like it got started. Then it got squashed, and there's still and there's still questions this day. So,
looking at the second and third, as I said, Adam Cole and Johnny Gargano, they also had the fifth place with 6.6 for their match at TakeOver 25. These two aren't my cup of tea when they wrestle each other. The near falls at the end and the sort of over the top nature of it does, as I said, it's over the top for me. But there's no doubting that there's people that love this, and props to them. These two guys had a trilogy that dominated this singles matches of the year voting. As I said, if they were all combined together, this would be the clear winner. So props to those guys. Moving on to tag team match of the year, and coming in third was the Viking Raiders versus Ricochet and Aleister Black from TakeOver New York, although they're probably the War Raiders at the time. I can't quite remember the timeline of all that, but they're the Viking Raiders now at TakeOver New York against Blackochet. And then coming in second, you've got the Women's War Games, Team Ripley versus Team Baszler, with 15.5% of the vote. And coming in first is the Men's War Game, TakeOver Team Undisputed Era versus Team Ciampa with 25.1% of the vote. I said Undisputed Era sort of swept the table, and it's proving to be right in this case. What were your thoughts about the War Games matches, Imp?
I personally, the women's War Games match is my favourite one WWE have done. Like out of all the War Games matches they've done, the women's match for me was the best. The men's one had its spots, it had its moments, and it had the insane finish. Like, it was still like a really good match. Don't get me wrong, but for me, the Team Ripley versus Team Baszler, that was the best they've ever done. So I would swap the two around. I would have the women's one on top. But that's just my personal preference. I preferred the women's match from the point that, because it was building really nicely, from the point that Dakota Kai turned on Tegan Nox. The match, in terms of pacing, in terms of crowd noise, it didn't go down, and he still had like entrants to come. So it was always what the men's match did as well was when the heels come in, they come in, stompy, 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 boo heels, kind of thing. That didn't happen in the women's match because the momentum and the pace of the match never died down, and so neither did the crowd. And they painted the story of suddenly you're into a handicap situation as well, and it's all about battling, fighting off against them. You've got the Io Shirai moonsault. You've got, I guess, going a bit too far with it, the heels, and that they paid the price for it, like trying to go too mental and showing off. Or they were too heelish, Sam. Too heelish.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you. I think the men's one benefits from, as you said, the insane ending, also the Kevin Owens pop, in terms of being memorable. Having him in it is certainly something that sticks in your memory. The women's, I don't know, I think it's a bit more of a cerebral, a little bit more of a story, and less reliant on those sort of, I hesitate to call them cheap pops, because it was a very well done match, no doubt. But I would probably have picked the women's one. My favourite of the year actually was the Shield versus Corbin, Lashley and McIntyre at Fastlane, which came in fifth. But yeah, I won't hold the War Games games getting their thing. That's the second year in a row that War Games has won the tag match of the year, actually. The men's War Games last year also won tag match of the year. And the first year I ran these awards, 2017, another cage match won tag match of the year with the Usos versus the New Day Hell in a Cell. So tag matches, stick them in a cage and people love them, I guess. And WWE Feud of the Year, if you've been paying attention, you won't have any problem guessing who gets first in this one. Coming in third, though, Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair, getting 17.1% of the vote. Of course, the first ever women's main event at WrestleMania. No matter how convoluted they made the story in the end, no matter how frustrating it was to see Charlotte Flair potentially needlessly being added on, there's no doubt that this is a massively historical moment for women's wrestling in the WWE. Definitely deserves its place there. 17.8%, just pipping it out. NXT versus SmackDown versus Raw, getting 17.8% of the vote in the build-up to Survivor Series, but the clear winner, Adam Cole versus Johnny Gargano. They won this one. They got 31% of the vote, even 31% of the vote. If you, as I said, if you paid attention to the who won the singles matches of the year, you won't be too surprised with this one. These guys dominated that, and they've dominated this feud of the year. What do you think about the results here?
Oh, I gave all of my awards to Kofi Kingston, Daniel Bryan.
Yes, so did I.
So for me, it's kind of like it's not just the matches they had; it's the like in terms of the
Elimination Chamber match was the best Elimination Chamber ever, I think. But,
and it's just from week to week the storytelling as well. Like how did things progress week to week? In that one, third place Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair falls on its ass. From week to week, it was convoluted nonsense. It kind of felt like Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch was the match which the fans wanted, but last year at WrestleMania, they'd started to set up Charlotte Flair, Ronda Rousey, and they were going through with it no matter what. I was just like,
but they didn't just chuck Charlotte Flair in; they did so many other stupid things.
There were things over the course of the year. There were things set up, so you could have used your past year to set up putting Charlotte Flair in. But what they actually did was Vince McMahon comes in going, even though you won the Royal Rumble, I don't like you, so I'm choosing Charlotte Flair instead, and she's in the match now. It's just like, there were so many things that had actually happened where they would feel
But
natural.
that was after Becky Lynch had been injured, and then she had to apologize. Then she wasn't injured, then she had to win a match, and then she still wasn't in, and then she had to apologize. No, then Ronda Rousey had to give up the title, and then she did it, and then I think Becky Lynch had to apologise, and then Charlotte got put in, and then Charlotte won off Asuka. Oh my god, yeah.
And not forgetting, or the millennial Ronda Rousey's promos fell in the toilet in this point. The millennial man promo, even though they're the same age,
the fourth wall, which isn't even breaking the fourth wall; it's breaking kayfabe.
But
NXT versus there you go.
But on pay-per-view, every time on pay-per-view, they nailed it, and the backstage brawl where they were kicking each other in the cars, that was awesome. I really enjoyed that.
Yep.
And the main event as well was a massive moment, but no, it was awful week to week. So NXT SmackDown Raw injected so much energy and freshness, but again, it stalled for a little bit. So no. Adam Cole versus Johnny Gargano, the matches were amazing, but the TV build was fine. So
it happened by accident because Gargano was meant to go against Ciampa at TakeOver New York, but Ciampa got injured, so they threw Adam Cole in there. And then, of course, NXT versus SmackDown versus Raw. This, an old thing, brand supremacy, got a massive dose of freshness with NXT being involved, almost by accident, potentially, with the delayed flight back from Saudi Arabia. But just to wind this one up, I put the fifth place one in as a bit of a cheeky move, and I'm so glad it came in fifth. R-Truth versus Drake Maverick, 9.6% for their feud over the 24/7 title. This was amazing on Twitter. It was so funny to see, and I'm so glad that it's got some props in this one. But moving along, we've got to keep moving. AEW Singles Match of the Year. This was a walk home and well-deserved, I think. We'll go from third. Chris Jericho versus Kenny Omega at Double or Nothing got 7.2% of the vote. Kenny Omega versus John Moxley at Full Gear, their unsanctioned match, got 23.5% of the vote. But well and truly taking this one home, Cody versus Dustin Rhodes at Double or Nothing, 44.7% of the vote. This one was an amazing story, an amazingly emotional tale that both men, well, actually, I think it was Dustin, bled everywhere. But the two brothers fighting until they had worked out whatever was going on between them and then being able to unite at the end. Again, what a story. What an absolutely fantastic match. These are the kind of matches that make me love Wrestling Imp.
And for me, the big thing this tells me is the value over putting so much story into your matches. Cody versus Dustin was that match. It wasn't it was like the massive spot matches. I guess I don't really count Omega Moxley as that because that was like its own brand of hardcore. But the big spot crazy kind of matches, not one made this list. I think that kind of says something. But yeah, Cody versus Dustin, 100% deserved. It was, especially as they did the videos on the road too, as well, because it didn't have a TV show at the time. It was told so damn well. You understood like the animosity between the two of them, and the fact that this match was to mend their brotherhood. They had to have this fight, and it had to turn bloody. But come the end of it, they were closer than ever. I loved it.
Yep. Oh, what a story.
What a story.
I want to go and watch it again. Let's go on to AEW Tag Match of the Year. Coming in third with 13.9% of the vote. This was another close one in the lower positions. The Young Bucks versus Cody and Dustin. This was the match after Cody and Dustin went to war at Fight for the Fallen. 13.9%. Then there was, coming in second, the Lucha Brothers versus the Young Bucks at All Out, their Escalera de la Muerte. And then coming in first, the Lucha Brothers versus the Young Bucks at Double or Nothing, 30.2%. I was surprised by this one. I really thought that the All Out match would get up over the, I guess, more traditional tag match, if you could call a match between the Lucha Brothers and the Young Bucks more traditional at Double or Nothing. But there was no doubt that at Double or Nothing, these guys absolutely, in both matches really, absolutely went all out, balls to the wall. All of the moves, every single move ever in wrestling in these matches.
He sounded like a certain president. Just like, all of the moves, we got all of the best moves, all the good moves. We do all the moves. It's like, you're not a wrestler, are you? I completely agree. Again, weirdly, this fits into what I was saying for the last one, where the match with the craziest spots didn't win. It was the other match. Not that, as you were saying, not that it's traditional in any sense, but it was, it was really good. I want to give a couple of shout-outs I've got for, there was a tag match on, what's it called? I think it was Fight for the Fallen. There was a tag match where it had the Luchasaurus, someone versus Dark Order. It's like
Jurassic Express.
That's it. Oh, yeah. It was Jurassic Express versus Dark Order versus another team.
SCU, I think.
Yeah, and that
or
was...
Private Party? No, SCU.
I can't remember. It's in the middle of the show, and it was amazing. Yep. Like, brought the crowd to life. Incredible match. And the Santana and Ortiz versus Young Bucks that opened the last pay-per-view, Full Gear. Yep. Like, that one also, really enjoyed that one. Like, an amazing opener. But again, I can't really argue with any of these choices. Like, for the top two, for me, is in no question. It's just which order they go with. But it's nice. It's not even a small difference either. It's actually quite a big jump, and it's kind of interesting to see. The match with the mental spots wasn't the one that won. So
yeah, and these two are the Lucha Brothers and the Young Bucks. They are a sort of an acquired taste for some people. Some people don't like this brand of wrestling. For people who subscribe to the Rich Ladder Pro Wrestling ideology, shout outs to Rich Ladder, One Nation Radio. For people who subscribe to that, man, matches do not get much better than the Lucha Brothers versus the Young Bucks. These guys are athletically incredible and fantastically skilled at, stringing spots together. The ladder match could have been an absolute disaster. I think we spoke later in the year, last year, about a hardcore match that went really poorly, I felt, in New Japan because they didn't have any sort of cohesiveness to it. You know, the spots in this could have been, you know, felt completely unnatural, but they flowed. And in all of their matches, the spotty nature of it, if you're not looking for it, these big moves flow into one another and they make it work. So they are masters of their own particular craft.
Yeah.
Moving along, though, to AEW Feud of the Year. This was a close one. This one changed leaders a number of times. So coming up for third was Cody versus Dustin Rhodes, 10.2%. Probably, I'll just say this about that one. It probably sort of wasn't long enough to really get a lot of votes and only had the one match. Although, to be fair, the top two only had one match as well, but they just sort of had longer feuds. Anyway, moving along to the two big hitters in this category. Coming in second, Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega, 35.2%. And then coming in first, Cody versus Chris Jericho in at 38%. I don't think it's any coincidence that both of these are from Full Gear after the AEW had a chance to move to Dynamite, so was able to fully flesh out some feuds, but both of these incredibly heated feuds. And I love the way, personally, that both of these sort of intermingled almost, and you had those massively chaotic brawls at the end where, you know, all of the elite and all of the inner circle would come in, and then all of a sudden Jon Moxley had come in and he would, you know, start beating up Kenny Omega but get caught in the crossfire, and you also had Park coming in from the other side as well. Yeah, fantastic stuff for both of these feuds.
I like how AEW's already it's already set up kind of memes for itself, or what's going to happen on an AEW show. It's going to be a brawl, the lights will go out, Canadian Destroyer. That's AEW. But
what do you think of the stipulation with Cody and Chris Jericho, Imp?
I'm a massive fan of it, personally, because again, when like the massive, because it was, not forgetting, of course, for this match they introduced the judges as well, and the big talking point building up to it. I remember talking about it with Ray Cash from Jetshot Radio, another shout out. But with there's other people, but I just can't remember their names. For some reason Ray Cash is the only one I can remember. So he wasn't the only one, but there was a talk of, well, they're introducing this, so obviously Cody's going to win. But I don't know if you were in the same boat, but I was thinking of, well, AEW have promised long-form storytelling, and it's the famous Chekhov's gun kind of thing in WWE. Why would we're used to the world of WWE where if they show the gun, why else are they showing the gun if they're not going to immediately fire it?
Second.
Long form storytelling, or in the case of an actually well written movie or TV show, that's not how you use Chekhov's gun. That's not the technique. That's not what it's all about at all. You're teasing firing it, not showing it because you're going to fire it immediately.
Straight away.
Yeah, like you tease it being fired. And that's what I saw the judges as. Like, they introduce it in here, they set up the concept. Later down the line, the gun will be fired, but not here. It didn't make any sense for the story they built it, and it made sense for me for Cody to not be able to challenge for the title. I fully expect at some point he will be able to, but again, long-form storytelling, it won't be in 2020.
Yep. It will either be when Chris Jericho or whoever's got the title, whatever heel's got the title, has run roughshod over anything, or it will be a fantastic way to turn Cody Rhodes heel. And anyone who's seen Cody Rhodes as a heel knows that is a good thing. So if they are going to use that to turn him heel, I will be all in on that as well.
Props for Cody for last year being the most hated man outside of WWE with his character, and this year being the most beloved. Yeah. That shows how great he is.
Yep. Yep.
All the props, yeah. But yeah, Feud of the Year, I totally agree with this one being top.
Moving along to back to global / indie singles match of the year. And one thing, before I get into the results for this, one thing I love this year is typically this one has one or two massive standouts. So like last year, Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada and Tetsuya Naito and Chris Jericho. Tetsuya Naito and Chris Jericho had... No, last year it was Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho that massively stood out. I think between them they took over 50% of the vote. This year, the winning vote is 10%, and in total there was 35 different matches getting votes, which I think is fantastic and talks to how wrestling has diversified, and the audience for the audience of wrestling is more and more knowledgeable and more willing to explore different and awesome things going around. But getting into this is a close one. So I'll go from fourth, because fourth is very close to second and third. Fourth coming in with 7.1% is Park versus Psy. I'm not sure. At Dragon Gate Truthgate. Coming in third, equal second actually, with 7.8% is Tessa Blanchard versus Semi Callahan at Impact Slammiversary, tying with Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Kenny Omega from New Japan's Wrestle Kingdom 13, and finally winning by just a handful of votes with 9.9% of the votes, Tetsuya Naito versus Chris Jericho from Wrestle Kingdom 13. So close, and I love that it's so close. And that there's so much diversity represented in terms of promotions. There's some, there's Dragon Gate, which is essentially a Japanese juniors promotion. There's intergender wrestling there, and then of course you've got the big names of the Wrestle Kingdom brand topping it out. Fantastic that there's so much diversity in this.
Oh yeah, and my match of the year isn't even on it. Which kind of says something. But I understand, because for me, my match of the year was the Best of the Super Juniors final, and I kind of understand like the wider wrestling audience probably didn't watch Best of the Super Juniors. Like, it's one of the side tournaments, I guess, for New Japan Pro Wrestling, with the winner getting a junior championship match at Dominion, which is their second biggest show of the year. But yeah, I understand a lot of people wouldn't have watched it, but it was Will Ospreay versus Shingo Takagi. Absolutely amazing. Like, for me, my match of the year still... I might need to rewatch it, because, of course, Will Ospreay versus Hiromu is currently taking the clout. And I'm like, but I think I prefer Shingo versus Will Ospreay. Still, I'd have to rewatch it. But it's that story of Shingo being undefeated and Will Ospreay being that guy who wanted to carry the junior division after Hiromu's injury. And I just assumed Shingo was going to win. But no, Will Ospreay did, and ever since then he's been on an absolute tear. But yeah, Will Ospreay versus Shingo Takagi was my match of the year by a margin. But I can't really argue
my match of the year was actually at the same show, but was a different match. It was Jon Moxley versus Juice Robinson. So watch Best of the Super Juniors. That was that was my show of the year, actually, just to tip my hand. But props to Naito and Jericho who took this one out. They had a bloody brawl. This was I actually rate this higher than the Omega Jericho match personally.
I did too.
It felt more like a blood feud fight, because they had matches coming into it, and these two went out there and tore each other up. There's an amazing shot of, I think it was Jericho did a DDT for Naito on the announcers' desks, and afterwards they do a shot of the announcers' desk, and there is a massive dent where he has just plowed Naito's head into the table, but which is just one thing that happened, but an absolute it's emblematic of what happened in this match. And you know what, I think Tetsuya Naito may go a long way to picking this award up next year as well, if I have anything to say about it.
It's gonna take some doing to top that Wrestle Kingdom main event. It was, to be fair, we said that after
both of them.
Like 2 years ago after Omega Okada, and like, it's going to take some doing to top that. And by the end of the year, it's like, I don't even know if it cracks my top three. It's just crazy to say.
Well, I mean, you said that about the first Wrestle Kingdom one for this year, and then after the next night, it was like, which one's top? Anyway, we've got to keep moving. So just as the thing, Tetsuya Naito versus Chris Jericho at Wrestle Kingdom 13 takes out the Global/Indie Singles Match of the Year. Global/Indie Tag Match of the Year, another one that had lots of representation, but ultimately had one winner that just scraped over the line. First, coming in third was the Briscoes versus the Villain Enterprise at ROH 17th anniversary. Coming in second with 20% even of the vote was the Briscoes versus Evil and Sonata versus GOD versus Villain Enterprises at MSG. Probably should chuck in Enzo and Cass. Maybe not. We'll ignore them like the cameras did. You can tweet about it if you like. Coming in first was LAX, so also known as Santana and Ortiz in AEW, versus the Lucha Brothers at Impact Homecoming, who got 20.6 of the vote. So just taking this one by 0.6. I didn't watch that match. I haven't seen it. I haven't watched any Impact. Did you see that match, Imp?
I did, and it was really, really good. But it was a Lucha Brothers and versus Santana Ortiz. If you picture that match happening in AEW, this was that match. So it was really, really good. It's one of those matches that I keep forgetting was this year. But of course, LAX were doing their goodbye tour really for the Indies, and this was kind of at the start of that. I think I can't quite remember. But yeah. Amazing match, 100% deserves to be up there. ROH, again, everything in ROH to me has fallen down a level. But the tag team match at Madison Square Garden was one of their higher points. Aside from the Enzo and Cass thing, yes, they did have two.
Until it was their worst point.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like the match itself with the actual people who were meant to be in the match, that people knew were in the match, including the wrestlers. Yeah, that was actually, it was really, really good. It doesn't hurt that they had Evil and Sonata as well to pop the crowd because they were so crazy for New Japan that night. But yeah, that was a really solid match. That and the ladder match for the Ring of Honor title were the only 2 points for Ring of Honor that didn't just sour the crowd. Well, no, this match did sour the crowd as well. But it was...
With that, the most disappointing thing, honestly, with that is they did nothing with it. They had, Enzo and Cass were absolutely hot. And they took a massive risk doing that because I'm not sure if you've listened to the podcast. A really interesting podcast with Enzo and Cass on Chris Jericho's podcast. Not many people knew what was going on. The Guerrillas of Destiny, Evil and Sonata didn't know, and I don't think Villain Enterprises knew either, that these guys were going to jump the barrier. Enzo and Cass could have gotten completely beaten up, absolutely. It could have been really, really bad, and they took that risk and then did nothing with it, which I don't know. I don't want to harp on Ring of Honor too much. I've got one parting shot for them down the line, but I
will just say
that was a really good match, you go.
I was going to say, you don't inform the sons of Haku. Are you crazy? You know,
and then they didn't even film the damn thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
personally,
it was a good match.
Yeah, I would Birds of Prey versus ELP and
as
Ishimori.
did I. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But LAX versus the Lucha Brothers at Impact Homecoming, taking out the Global/Indie Tag Match of the Year. Moving on to the Feud of the Year. I love the winner of this one. This is fantastic. So Kazuchika Okada versus Jay White coming in at 10.4%. The Lucha Brothers versus LAX coming in at 18% gets second. And taking this out, this was a giant surprise for me. I haven't watched Impact, so I need to go and watch Impact. But this was an amazing surprise to me. Tessa Blanchard versus Sami Callihan, 25.4%. To think that we have a intergender matchup winning Feud of the Year. That blows my mind, Imp.
And as I talked about it earlier, I did say that Sami Callihan deserves just as much praise for the hand he's kind of helped in getting Tessa Blanchard to that level. This echoes that. I find it hard to disagree. Really, it was. It's worked to perfection. Tessa Blanchard feels like their biggest star, and Sami Callihan feels like their biggest heel. And when you've done that, and they are both over in those roles to quite a marvelous level, that means there's no fault in it. It's worked to perfection. And I'm trying to think of contenders to the crown, Walter David Starr for OTT, and Jordan Devlin as well gets David Starr.
Came in fifth, yeah.
Their promo packages and the way they tell the story for that is amazing. But Tessa Blanchard and Sami Callihan has been so, because it's got the weekly TV show as well. It's been told so well across that as well, where they make both of them feel like the stars they're meant to be in the perfect roles as well. And you can't wait to see Tessa Blanchard specifically beat Sami Callihan up. It's just they've done it so well.
And in an era where heels really good heels are very much at risk of getting cheered, what's one way you can ensure that a heel is always going to get booed in New Japan is different, but in America, what's one way? If you have them beating up a girl, they are not going to get any cheers. And they, props to Impact for having the guts to pull something like this off. This is not something that, as I said, this blows I haven't watched Impact, but this blows my mind that this is top, and that they've had the guts to do that. Props to Impact. That is fantastic. And I think I might go and watch some of this because I didn't know it was happening, and I'm, really excited and surprised that it is there. Moving along, though, brand of the year. No surprise that there's two big hitters there. Two small indie promotions coming out of America. So I'm going to start with fourth, because who would have thought that in 2019 we would be talking about the NWA at all, beyond being a punchline. 4.5%. Congratulations to them for what they've done. Billy Corgan is we owe him as wrestlers. He could, he's got islands of money. He could just relax on that, but no, he wants to do something different, and he's brought the NWA back to more prominent than it's been probably any time this decade, this century, I would say. 4.5%. New Japan coming in third. This was my vote for promote brand of the year, 8.6%. But the top two, the lead of this changed a number of times. There was a time where it was seesawing between 4 or 5 votes either way, and each side would sway in front and then the other. In the end, AEW came in second with 38.4% of the vote, and WWE came in with 42.5% of the vote. I mean, how awesome... I will say this. How awesome is it that there is a second promotion in America that is challenging WWE? Obviously, they're not going to be as big as WWE, but they are challenging them, and they are fighting for audience share on Wednesday nights. They are doing amazing things for wrestlers' welfare. They are showing that 2-hour wrestling programming can be done and done well, and forcing the WWE to up its own game. And I have little doubt that even though AEW are, according to WWE, a pissant company, the WWE certainly seems to have upped its game in the second half of this year. As a result of AEW coming around and saying, look, we might not be as big as you, but if you want to maintain your monopoly, your size, your market dominance, you are going to have to start to care and start to put on the kind of wrestling that the fans want to watch.
In terms of how this reflects the actual order of who are the 5 biggest wrestling companies, if you are like a Western viewer or if you are American, this order for me is 100% accurate. It's just... For
the record, Impact is in 5th with 1.3%. Sadly, Ring of Honor only got 2 votes this year.
Oh, really? 2? Oh, that's insane.
Coming from second non-WWE last year to only getting 2 votes, which is a sad tale. But anyway, you keep going with your thought, Imp.
But yeah, so for me, this accurately represents the... what I would call the fan base, and who are the biggest promotions in America.
Hierarchy.
Yeah, WWE should be so much higher, is kind of my thinking, and the only reason it's so close is because they fell off a cliff for the 2nd or 3rd year in a row. This is as in over the course of the summer, especially because I stopped watching over the summer last year, and then this year was even worse. So it's 2 years in a row. Me, Chirpy Imp, I've reached a point where I have stopped watching for months and then come back for SummerSlam. So for me that kind of paints the picture of WWE with all of the resources they've got, with the ingrained habit of viewership, with the amount of fans they've built over decades. This shouldn't be a 4-5% difference when they're up against a brand new company. It shouldn't be that tight. They should be sweeping the floor with them, but they're not, and that's because they've faltered. They failed essentially. They said it last year at Christmas, and this year they're in a worse state. Financially, they're killing it, but that's because they've accepted certain business methods. No,
What I would say to this is the fight for the dollars and cents is a no competition.
No contest.
But the fight for the hearts and minds of wrestling fans is alive and well.
Yes.
And 2020 is going to be an interesting year to see a full year of AEW going toe-to-toe with NXT. Last year, when I split these, we had the WWE Awards, which NXT breezed home in. And then, of course, we had the non-WWE Awards, which New Japan dominated in. This year, because of AEW, I wanted to lump everything together, and I didn't see any sense in separating NXT, SmackDown, and Raw. So the WWE are one company, and they've got a fan base. They have a fan base, and we've been ragging on them a lot, but they have done a lot of good things. NXT is a really solid, a really great wrestling company, and they have a lot of fans who are ride or die WWE fans. Yeah. And they deserve to win this. I think they've done enough that they deserve to have won this. I won't lie. I was, secretly, even though I voted for New Japan, I was secretly hoping AEW would win, just because. But this is a fan vote. We go with what you guys say, and you guys have popped WWE in. But yeah, as I said, the fight for the hearts and minds of the fans is alive and well, and it will be interesting to see what happens in 2020. Moving along to show of the year, and we've got coming in at third, NXT TakeOver War Games 3, with those two massive tag matches, 11.5%. The behemoth that is WWE WrestleMania 35 coming in second with 14% of the vote. And then we've got coming in at first, I think this is absolutely the rightful winner. AEW double or nothing, except for Best of the Super Juniors.
Yeah, I'd say yeah.
But AEW double or nothing coming in at 15.8%. This was a show that kicked off AEW in a phenomenal way. It was their best show of the year by a long shot, I think. Well, maybe not a long shot, but it was definitely their best show of the year. You had the fantastic opening match between the Young Bucks and the Strong Hearts. You had the Dustin versus Cody match, which was amazing, and then as we've already covered, the main event, Kenny Omega versus Chris Jericho, which I think is a bit of a forgotten match of the year candidate, with Jon Moxley debuting at the end of it. Just fantastic all round. Even from the Joshi match was, I'd never really watched Joshi wrestling before, and I've now got two favorite wrestlers who are Joshis in Riho and Hikaru Shida. Amazing. This was a really fantastic card. Of course, WrestleMania 35 had, everything that WrestleMania has. But highlights, of course, the women's main event, Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan, the big highlight. But also, I'll give a shout out to The Miz versus Shane McMahon, which was a surprise. I was very surprised. I enjoyed that. And as with so many WrestleManias, with this, if you watch, up until like the Daniel Bryan and Kofi match, it's an amazing show. It did tend to drag on because, WrestleMania goes long these days, but that's the way that WWE want to do it, and there's no doubt that they put on an incredible show at WrestleMania 35.
Yeah, and weirdly, my shout-outs are more WWE shows, which given the year, you wouldn't think. But, so, the Royal Rumble, for me, that was... Royal Rumble sometimes falls out of these categories because it was just so long ago by the time you're voting.
The setting for that was amazing this year.
Oh, yeah. And every match, seemingly, the winners were perfect. Like, the 100% right choice. The hot starter of Asuka versus Becky Lynch. You had Brock Lesnar, Finn Balor. Keep forgetting Ronda Rousey, Sasha Banks. And then there are the two Royal Rumble matches with, again, both winners of the Royal Rumbles were 100% the right choice. Which is, like, yes... perfect. Like, they nailed the Royal Rumble this year after nailing it last year with the winners as well. So it was Royal Rumble for me, 100% deserving of a shout out. Elimination Chamber, purely because of the point that you pointed out that arguably it was the best Elimination Chamber match they've ever had, which really, really elevates it. Just insane. Also interesting that Wrestle Kingdom, I'm pretty certain Wrestle Kingdom's made this list every year you've done this, and this year doesn't even scrape top 5. for me, that possibly shows the quality of the show overall, that it did seem a bit rushed. It felt a little bit rushed, really, is my only real criticism. The top matches still delivered, but as an overall show, it was a little bit rushed, and I kind of do agree.
Outside of, just to jump in there, outside of AEW and WWE, it was the highest rated of all of the other shows.
Best of Super Juniors.
Wrestle King.
Best Super Juniors.
That was my favourite one. That also had Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Zack Sabre Jr., Goto versus Jay White. Man, that was such a good match.
To be fair, there were some G1 Climax nights where you just tuned in to watch G1 Climax and was like, oh my god, that entire show was amazing. Yep. But I can't remember the specific night. I'm not Rich Latter. I don't remember the specific nights. But yeah, I guess shout outs to New Japan then for that. But I do agree. Impact as well, they've made a habit of Slammiversary being 100% worth the tune in. Last year's, for me, was incredible because that had Sami Callihan versus Pentagon Jr., which was amazing. This year, it was really, really good, but it didn't quite hit their amazing levels to break this top 5, which I kind of feel like every show on here has definitely earned that place. But yeah, biggest shout-outs to Elimination Chamber, Royal Rumble. We've criticised WWE a lot, obviously, but yeah, from the Royal Rumble WrestleMania season, it was a lot of fun, and the pay-per-views were fantastic. Even Fastlane.
Another card, just to wrap up before we close off the year, another card that deserves a bit of a shout out for the historical nature of it was the G1 Supercard, the first show that wasn't WWE in Madison Square to be in Madison Square Garden in, I think, over 50 years, which, as I've said, a big theme for this year is just the diversity and the broadening of the wrestling world. And I think that shows as much as anything where wrestling is going in terms of those guys being able to put on a card. And there's now rumors that New Japan will put on a card at Madison Square Garden just for themselves, which would be amazing in itself. So that wraps up the show of the year, as we said, AEW or Nothing, wrapping that up. So that's the celebration for 2019. And as I said, before we get into the wrestlers of the decade and that, all of these will go up on lordsofpain.net. You'll be able to jump on there and see the full results. So the top 5 for everyone in graph form, as well as a little bit of extra commentary if you haven't heard enough of my gibbering in there. But let's move on to what I think are the big and the most prestigious things. And the thing that really excited me this year was Wrestler of the Decade. Now, in terms of the voting, I did that a little bit differently because, with Wrestler of the Decade, I feel like you need to be able to put out more than just one vote. With everything else, everyone just got one vote, so you can only pick one thing. But for Wrestler of the Decade, Tag Team of the Decade, you got to pick 3 wrestlers to get your votes, and then for Match of the Decade, you got to pick 5. So you kind of got to put forward a little bit more of a diverse opinion and have your points spread a little bit, as opposed to having it all just on one person or nothing. But Wrestler of the Decade, I'll start with 10th, Brock Lesnar with 8.3%, tied with Becky Lynch. So she should actually probably be tied for 9th. Becky Lynch on 8.3% as well. Fantastic to see a female in there as well. Seth Rollins gets 8th with 8.5%. Kazuchika Okada, 11.2%. Kenny Omega comes in 6th on 12.5%. Coming in 5th, we've got John Cena, 13.7% of the votes. CM Punk comes in 4th with 16.5% of the votes. Chris Jericho comes in 3rd with 19.4% of the votes. And then top 2, you've got Daniel Bryan with 24.5% of the votes. And then the Wrestler of the Decade, as voted by Lords of Pain, AJ Styles, the phenomenal one, 38% of the vote. And it's really cool that AJ Styles gets this, because if there's a case you could make for a lot of the guys on this list, but AJ Styles, he's wrestled in all of the major promotions. He wrestled in TNA at the start of the year, the start of the decade in 2010s. He was the main event of their first Monday night. Impact was against Kurt Angle versus AJ Styles. And then he, of course, went to New Japan, where he was the leader of the Bullet Club. And that was really when the Bullet Club stormed the wrestling culturally and became, this shirt that every second wrestling fan seemed to have. That was AJ Styles that sort of got it to that point. And then, of course, went to the WWE and against all odds became one of the absolute rolled gold top guys in the WWE, a place that at the start of the decade, I think people would have seen him going to WWE, but never getting the kind of position he had. Let's not forget, he's had the second longest WWE championship run. We'll forget the Universal title, but the second longest behind CM Punk was AJ Styles, which is incredible to think when you look back at the start of the decade. Of course, Daniel Bryan coming in second. The Yes Movement was probably the most amazing explosion of fan love that we have seen across, at any point since the Attitude Era. Just universally beloved, and then to come back in the way he has and go back into another championship match at WrestleMania, and then in number third, Chris Jericho, of course, has been a fixture across the decade. The start of the decade, he was the guy who wore suits and was, speaking, using big words to annoy the crowd. And now he's, wearing leather jackets and annoying the crowd in other ways. But obviously, I'm a big fan. What are your thoughts on this list here, Imp?
Yeah, in terms of, Daniel Bryan was, in terms of the fans falling in love with a wrestler and WWE crowning him in the main event of WrestleMania, that was something special. It was, and I kind of feel quite unlucky with what happened afterwards as well, in terms of injuries and things. Still feels so glad to have him back, but obviously he'll never be the top guy go for that position again, which is kind of a bit sad. But yeah, at that moment in that first half of the decade, he got so much fan support. It was incredible. Now, for me, it kind of, the CM Punk chants lasted, but he didn't have the same emotional fan impact that Daniel Bryan did, or on that emotional level. It was incredible. AJ Styles started the decade in TNA. At that point, it had been bought out by Hogan. Hogan wasn't deemed a mega racist yet, but the quality was, Impact was going TNA and Impact were kind of going down in quality a little bit. They're about to enter a bad patch. AJ Styles got out ahead of the curve
when Hulk Hogan came in.
Yeah, so he got out ahead of the curve and then went to Japan, and just as Sam was just saying, brought Bullet Club to an amazing fan popular level in the States, and then the Elite went can't really speak.
Yeah.
Van Riot with it when AJ Styles went to WWE.
Now they've got their own wrestling promotion.
Yeah. Then in the second half of the decade, AJ Styles has become one of WWE's top guys, and which, again, it was one of the massive fears whenever, because he's AJ Styles, he's not a massive guy, thinking was his wrestling ability wouldn't matter in WWE because they're the land of the bigger, muscly people. So he would kind of fall to the wayside. But of course, at the same time, the Shield guys were kind of getting over, and Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins, neither of those guys are big, muscly people either. Obviously, the number one guy they went with was, but the others kind of weren't. So there was a space for AJ Styles, and next thing you know, he's having classics with John Cena, and he's having his match at WrestleMania every year is one to look out for. It's just I would never have predicted he would have had such an amazing success, and he owes it, and I kind of owe it as well to his success in Japan, led directly into him working the kind of more character side in WWE. Because he's always a fantastic...
And also, I'll jump in there and say he also owes it to our fourth place getter, CM Punk. The fact CM Punk is on this list as high as he is, I think is well deserved at fourth with 16.5% of the vote. The way, of course, what he did with the pipe bomb and his rivalry with John Cena was incredible, but I think the biggest impact CM Punk had, and also Daniel Bryan to a large extent as well, is the way that they changed the game for wrestlers that had sort of come from the indie scene. Previously, you had wrestlers like John Cena, Batista, Randy Orton, products of the WWE promotion, and the indie wrestlers that sort of scrapped on through, like your Brian Kendricks, your John Morrisons. They were, maybe left on there to fill out the mid card, but they weren't really given the keys to the kingdom. They weren't made main eventers. Whereas when CM Punk dropped that pipe bomb, he smashed through that glass ceiling, became the first wrestler with the sort of that's tarred with the indie brush to take the main event. And now look at the way that they recruit. It's all indie wrestlers. The list of indie wrestlers who made their name on the indies that are part of the WWE now. Of course, AJ Styles is a big one, but you've got Kevin Owens, of course, Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins, who also made this list. You've got Adam Cole, Shinsuke Nakamura, Sami Zayn, like I could go Samoa Joe. I could go on and on and on and on about the influence that Punk had, and AJ Styles definitely owes it to that. But I will never forget when AJ Styles debuted in that 2016 Royal Rumble. I wasn't paying any attention to wrestling outside of the WWE at the time, and so I didn't even realize that he was a free agent, ready to go around. And I wasn't on Twitter a whole lot at the time as well. I was more just passively watching, and when I saw it, I was like, "Is that? You're kidding? That's AJ Styles in WWE." Losing my mind, and I was at a party, like a Royal Rumble party with a bunch of people who barely watch WWE, let alone anything outside of that. And they were like, what's going on? I was like, that's AJ Styles. This is incredible. What's he doing in WWE? And that was such an exciting time to, it just felt so out of the blue, but the way he cemented himself is incredible. And I voted for Daniel Bryan in this because of the Yes Movement. That actually brought me back to wrestling in 2014. I stopped watching in 2010. And Daniel Bryan brought me back, and the way he returned as well. But I can't argue with AJ Styles being one of them. Yeah, I'd also think as well, I might mention as well Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada coming in at 6th and 7th. I'm a little disappointed Hiroshi Tanahashi didn't make it, but I'm not surprised. If I was going to pick 3 Japanese wrestlers to make it, it would be those 3. I understand Okada and Omega, the impact that their match had on the culture. And even though Tanahashi's got sort of bought New Japan back from the brink, I would say he's sort of been on the downslide a little bit since or Okada's been the focal point since it's really exploded into, I guess, what I'd call the mainstream of American wrestling, mainstream of Western wrestling culture. It really has been, of course, Omega and Okada have been the sort of the guys at the forefront of that cultural explosion.
Yeah, like personally, my top 3, my list was, my bar was extremely high. So my guys were Hiroshi Tanahashi, Kazuchika Okada, and John Cena. When I say a high bar, I mean for the rest of the decade, those 3 were all the top guys, drawing in incredible crowds and money for the promotion, and they were incredible draws. They were over to such a strong degree. Obviously, John Cena not as much with our demographic, but he was. You can't argue however he was. Of course, you realise how great he was once he's gone, kind of thing. And so for me, my bar was extremely high. Hiroshi Tanahashi, I think really the only downside why he's not made the top 10 is a lot of the stuff he did, that his peak was before people started watching, before the American push. So if you've not gone back to watch it, you won't know why, for me, why he was the equivalent of Okada that is now. Like Okada, for me, he is... what John Cena was to WWE, that mega draw essentially at the top of the card, Okada is that now. He is the top guy at the top of the card. Don't know if that'll be different in this decade, because we've seen a slight change, but he was the top guy, drawing in amazing crowds. And Hiroshi Tanahashi, he and John Cena were essentially just they were each other's equivalent on the opposite sides of the world. Hence why they are both on the list. Both were incredible draws. So Hiroshi Tanahashi, completely different context. Like John Cena taking the torch from an incredibly successful company. Hiroshi Tanahashi, the exact opposite, bringing one from the dead and then kind of bringing them both to, in their separate countries, to be on similar levels of popularity, is an incredible achievement. But, of course, again, in terms of the LOP vote, he did that in the first half of the decade / the late noughties. And then he passed the torch in in the middle of this decade. So to the LP vote, most people just weren't watching. So if I hadn't done my story of Tanahashi, I wouldn't have. I knew about him, I knew the gravitas of it, but I wouldn't have felt it if I hadn't have gone back and gone, oh, they're not lying. He was the man, and he did save them. And in terms of the decade stuff, like, it's not even, for me, it's no question who the top three are. But of course, emotion and heart comes into it a bit more. I was very practical with mine, with an extremely high bar. Mine has very little emotion compared to the actual result, which is wrestlers that fans really have gravitated towards and really love.
Yeah, I think just before we move on, I just wanted to shout out in equal ninth position Becky Lynch. To think at the start of the decade, where women's wrestling was in WWE and in the broader Western wrestling culture, to think that the biggest star of the WWE would be, biggest full-time star would be a female, to have them go from having their match be the piss break at pay-per-views to now it's not even a big deal when not only they main evented WrestleMania, but it's not even a big deal when they main event pay-per-views. They main evented TLC this year and no one blinked. I don't see anyone even speaking about it. That's how normalized it is. And if we were to do a top 20, Charlotte Flair would also be in that. A lot of it's been her, but Becky Lynch has no one swept the culture like no female wrestler swept the culture like Becky Lynch. And last year when she sort of came out as the man and had that explosion in popularity, I hadn't seen anything like it since Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan's rise up the card in the way that the crowd was not just chanting for her when she was in the ring, but chanting for her when she wasn't in the ring and chanting for her when she wasn't even in the arena and they knew she wasn't in the arena. They were still chanting for her. And to think that at the start of the decade where women's wrestling was and now in the holding her place equal with Brock Lesnar, rightfully so, in terms of the fan vote, Becky Lynch is up there. That's fantastic. And that just shows, look, there's been a lot of ups and downs in wrestling this decade, but that's something that I think wrestling fans can really hold on to, has been a massive positive that's come out of the decade. But congratulations to AJ Styles, Wrestler of the Decade, as voted by Lords of Pain. .net viewers. Moving on to Tag Team in the Decade, we might not spend quite as long on this, but still worth going down. Equal 10th Tag Team in the Decade on 7.1. Equal 10th was The Revival and The Bar. Coming in at 9th was Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish, of course, as two teams, Red Dragon, and then as on the Indies and in New Japan, and then as Undisputed Era in the WWE. Coming in at 8th, the Lucha Brothers with 9.6. In at 7th, the Hardy Brothers, 10.1. Coming in at 6th, which I really love the fact they got so many votes, Beer Money Inc. at 12%. Not forgotten, one of the staples of Impact Wrestling in the late noughties and the early teens. Coming in at 5th, DIY, Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. 4th, the Usos, 19.3%. Coming in at 3rd, this is quite incredible actually, from the Indies, the Young Bucks, 20.8% of the vote. And then coming in at 2nd, the Shield, 29.6%, and then the tag team of the decade, as voted by Lords of Pain, with 39.3% of the vote. It's the New Day. Yes, it is. Bomp. You want to get your kazoo out and you can play the theme song for the New Day? New Day rocks. New Day rocks.
I've got a kazoo, by the way.
What an awesome story the New Day are, though. Like, you talk about... Have you listened to any of their podcasts recently? It's really interesting to listen to.
Yeah, I've listened to...
Because these are three guys who were on the down and outs. They were not a priority at all in terms of where the WWE was at. Kofi Kingston's career, he was a well-known person in the locker room, but he was well and truly entrenched in the middle of the mid-card, not even, I'd say, the upper mid-card. Just a fixture there. Win some, you lose some. You might pick up a US championship or an Intercontinental championship, but you might not. Xavier Woods and, Big E was potentially a failed experiment, and Xavier Woods was not even that. But these three got together and created something amazing, and it very organically created something amazing, trusted themselves, took a lot of risks in how they promoted themselves, and got over in a massive way. a massive way with the crowd, and all of it culminating in, firstly, massive tag team reign, the longest reigning tag teams of all time in the WWE, in terms of WWE championships. They hosted WrestleMania. They actually won the Feud of the Year in 2017 with the Usos. And then, of course, this year, culminating with the win, the elevation of Kofi Kingston from that middling mid-carder who was stuck there and was not moving anywhere, through to finally getting, matching the promise that he showed in 2010 when he feuded with Randy Orton in late 2009, early 2010. He won that WWE Championship, as we talked about earlier, in what we both think is the match of the year and what the LOP voted as the match of the year. Incredible stuff from the New Day here. Yeah.
And also, Imp, do you want to blow your pink kazoo? Isn't a euphemism. It's actually generally just a pink kazoo.
Oh, goodness me.
But yeah, I've listened to 2 of the New Day's podcasts, and it's really interesting to listen to. That fact that they were so down and out, and when you hear a lot of the BS they had to go through to even make it to television in the state they made it on, it's like they weren't received that well by the fans, but it could have been so much worse. And they steered the ship to average, essentially, with the beginning, and then made it work once they were on television. And the biggest success story of the year, obviously. And of course, by the end of the decade, it was such a success. Kofi Kingston becomes champion at WrestleMania in such an incredible degree. For me, the top 3 were without question, and they are the exact top 3 we've got. So that is awesome to see. The Shield are the most influential faction, but in terms of tag team of the decade, obviously they stopped being a tag team. They weren't actually around that long. Their impact was huge, but not for that long. The New Day, they've had that longevity. Even though you get a lot of fans saying that, the gimmick's tired, they need to move on now, they need to split up or whatever, they don't show any signs of that really ever happening. I don't feel that. I felt that this is their act, and I don't know if it's a very WWE conditioned thing where tag teams should split up within a year or 2. That's a very naughty, very WWE conditioned thing. For me, I think about the tag teams way in the past where they never broke up. That was their faction. The New Day are old school in that manner. They're a tag team, they're a faction. They're not going to turn on each other because they're friends. They're friends for life. Why would they do that?
It's actually a running joke on their podcast that one of them's going to break up with them. I think it's interesting. The Young Bucks, just thinking about it now, the Young Bucks and the New Day have got a lot of parallels in terms of they're both teams of guys who aren't going to, singles-wise, were not figuring, but they're teams that have really backed themselves, really strongly created a really unique and strong brand, and have absolutely hustled their way, with and done every single line of merchandise either of them could, and have been able to work their way through sheer will and determination and charisma, and remembering and reminding people that wrestling is fun, having a sense of humor, having a sense of fun to what they do. I think the Young Bucks and the New Day, they are 2 massive success stories, and they owe it all to themselves. The Shield, I will definitely talk about the Shield. They are by far the most pushed tag team on this list, but for good reason. These are 3 of the absolute the biggest names in the industry now. Jon Moxley / Dean Ambrose. All 3 of them have been massively successful in WWE. Now Jon Moxley is one of the biggest names in AEW. Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins also are one of the 2 of the biggest names in the WWE. The story of the Shield, I wrote about it on Lords of Pain, is massive for this decade in WWE, with the breakup, the rise of the Shield through the early years from when they debuted in 2012 to when they broke up in 2014 and had those amazing matches with the Wyatts and the Evolution, through to Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins feud over the years, and then the reunion, the 6-man tags that they've had. I think as a unit, maybe in terms of pure tag team action, they've had a lot of good 6-man, and I think they deserve their position on this based on just that as well. But when you look at their influence, as you said, and then where they are as singles and how the Shield has sort of spoken to what they do as singles, I rated them right up there. And I will also briefly just touch on the Usos, who I think are another team that, they spend a lot of time and have always been really solid in the ring, but in the second half of the decade, really sort of reinvented themselves and gave themselves some extra swagger. And from 2017 onwards have, really nailed the character stuff as well to go with their in-ring performance, which has always been fantastic. I'm a big fan of those guys as well, and I'm glad that they did so well on this list.
Another notice to Beer Money Inc. for making it. Just the influence is not forgotten.
Good to see that. Yep. Yeah, indeed. And moving along, so congratulations to the New Day, as we both said, worthy tag teams of the decade, as voted by Lords of Pain. Now, moving on to the big one, the match of the decade. And with this one, as I said, everyone who voted got 5 votes. Not everyone used 5 votes, actually, which I thought was interesting. But I love with...
Yeah.
You didn't? You didn't either. I really like with this one that there's, a split across... Actually, I might just read it out and then we'll talk a little bit more in depth. So coming in at 10th is AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura at Wrestle Kingdom 10 with 6.8% of the vote. Coming in at 9th, Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada, 2 out of 3 falls at Dominion 2018 with 17.4% in New Japan. At 8th, The Rock versus John Cena from WrestleMania 28, 7.9%. 7th, The Shield versus the Wyatt family at Elimination Chamber 2014, 8.3% of the vote. 6th, Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa at TakeOver New Orleans, unsanctioned match, 9% of the vote. Coming in at 5th, the top 5, The Undertaker versus Triple H at WrestleMania 28, 9.4%. At 4th, Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada, Wrestle Kingdom 11 main event, 9.6%. 3rd, Bayley versus Sasha Banks, TakeOver Brooklyn, 10.3% of the vote. And then coming in 2nd, John Cena versus CM Punk, Money in the Bank 2011, 34.7% of the vote. And then honestly, I'm going to call this an upset. I did not see this coming. The match of the decade, as voted by Lords of Pain.net readers, The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 26, gathered 39.1% of the vote. What a list of matches. I'll say that to start with. What a list of matches. Shows New Japan, shows WWE, it shows past legends, present legends. It shows women's wrestling. It talks about the past of the industry and The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker versus Triple H, and even to a degree The Rock versus John Cena, and the future of the industry with The Shield versus the Wyatts, and Kenny Omega versus Okada and Gargano versus Ciampa. What a list of matches, Imp. This is a really fantastic list.
Oh, 100%. And Shawn Michaels' last match, I've not watched Saudi Arabia, so this is still Shawn Michaels' last match. Yeah,
screw that. That was his last match.
And
just like Ric Flair never came out of retirement, neither did Shawn Michaels.
And I remember at the time, the build and hype for this match was amazing, and I just assumed that John Cena Batista would main event. Just because it's the title, damn it, it's got a main event. But no, it was 100% deserving. Such a fantastic farewell for Shawn Michaels. At the time, I remember thinking, it wasn't quite as good as a WrestleMania match the year before. But of course, we're talking about people ranking that as the best WrestleMania match ever. So comparing that to Undertaker Shawn Michaels, incredible. Weirdly, I kind of feel like
I prefer this match to the 25 match, honestly.
So I've not watched it since, so I need to go back and actually see it. Weirdly, I feel like Kofi Kingston, Daniel Bryan deserves to be on this list, but I don't know where. This is the other thing, because I didn't vote for it. Because the way I thought about it with this list were what were the three most, I guess, culturally impacting matches in terms of like the wrestling world. John Cena, CM Punk, and Bayley versus Sasha, and Kenny Omega, Kazuchika Okada, where they're second, third, and fourth. So that's kind of like there must have been quite a lot of people maybe thinking like me, where those three matches were extremely significant. But
I'll tell you what Daniel Bryan versus this will be funny actually. Daniel Bryan versus Kofi tied with a couple of things. Tied with where are we? Oh goodness me! I'll just tell you the funny one that it tied with. The final deletion, Jeff Hardy versus Matt Hardy.
Oh, they're equivalent.
Also, it also tied with the WrestleMania 32 women's match, the four-way Flair, Lynch, Banks, and Bayley.
Yeah, I mean, behind Bayley versus Sasha Banks, that's the second most, I guess, influential women's match of the decade. Although, or would you count the WrestleMania main event? Oh, I mean, one leads to the other.
The WrestleMania main event wasn't a good match, and historically, it was really important. But they didn't have a great match, whereas Bayley versus Sasha Banks was such a great match. Like, it's third for a reason. It holds its spot, not just historically, but as a match, it holds its spot really well. One above Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada, at the time, the greatest wrestling match that had ever been wrestled. If you put STEM into Dave Meltzer's ratings, and you can say what you want about that, but look, that's the match that turned me on to New Japan. I started watching New Japan because of that match, and the fact that Bayley and Sasha Banks is one ahead of it, amazing. The women's revolution was sort of already humming and running between that, but that certainly turned it up to a fever pitch. The two big ones, of course, though, because a lot were hovering around that 10, 9, sort of 8 area, but the two big ones, as we said, Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. You've got that amazing sort of face-off, and then the absolutely emotional ending of Shawn Michaels doing the Undertaker's taunt at him and going out defiantly, just as Shawn Michaels should, but also John Cena versus CM Punk at Money in the Bank 2011. That was a bolt of lightning. I've watched it now and I've heard it talked about. I wasn't watching at the time, but from all accounts, that was an absolute bolt of lightning that completely shook up the way that the WWE was, and everything about that match, the drama, the pipe bomb beforehand, of course, but then the drama of CM Punk's contract ending, and then props to WWE for giving Punk the win, and letting him run off with the championship. What an ending to a match. And you won't hear a louder fan reaction than CM Punk's entrance on that night.
Yeah, it's the exact demographic and fan base that they've been losing in the second half of the year. Just to hear that Raw at the start of the decade, there was so much hope of, oh my god, there might be a boom here, type of thing. And on the night, they absolutely nailed it. As in, if you would have gone to bed that night thinking, I think there's going to be a boom, they've led into it perfectly. They fecked it up every week from there on. But that night was something special. Not every week, most weeks. On that night, it was absolutely something special. An amazing proof again, like Daniel Bryan, Kofi Kingston, that when WWE get it right, they really get it right, and that was, But of course, like for me, like the real end of an era with Shawn Michaels' retirement, Undertaker for Shawn Michaels, it does hold a special place in my heart, even though I've not gone back and rewatched it. But I can't really argue with the top 5. Like, they're all so kind of important to the decade as well in terms of wrestling. So,
I honestly, I was quite well. I think it probably speaks to the LOP fan base and demographic that the Undertaker's 2 matches in the top 5 versus Triple H and versus Shawn Michaels did so well. That surprised me that they were so high. I expected them to do well, but not. I really expected Cena versus Punk to be the highest rated match. That's what I thought would be the match of the decade, and that's that I voted for the Shield versus the Wyatt family. I voted for Omega versus Okada. And then also I voted more selfishly for Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins at Money in the Bank 2015. And also I voted for Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Kota Ibushi at the G1 final, which, I was probably the only person that voted for that, I think. But that's for me. That's right up there. But yeah, such a great list of matches. I'll never forget. So Elimination Chamber 2014, the Shield versus the Wyatt family. As I kind of said, it was Daniel Bryan that sort of drew me back into wrestling in 2014. But that Elimination Chamber was the first pay-per-view I watched. Well, I say, as I illegally downloaded it, because this was before the WWE Network had come to Australia. And I had, as I said, I'd not watched wrestling, so I didn't know either of these two teams, and they faced off and the crowd was going mental and it looked awesome. The promo was awesome, and then the match was just insane and so different to anything I remembered ever happening previously when I'd been watching. These three men on each side just going to war and becoming stars in front of my eyes. And I don't know, to me that was a hugely impactful match, and I'm really stoked to see that it kind of got on this list in number 7.
Yeah, there's I guess, as you know, every match. I guess the biggest surprise for me is AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura.
Yeah,
especially knowing the LOP audience, it kind of shocks me that it did make the list, because it like Kota Ibushi versus Hiroshi Tanahashi, it was a fantastic match, but in terms of the cultural impact it had, I don't really feel like it was that massive. Maybe this proves me wrong here, but I could think of maybe, as we brought them up, a few more even just in WWE that could have easily made this list. But yeah, that's maybe a shocker to me a little bit. That's maybe there are quite a lot of fans of that match. Maybe it's better than I kind of remember it to be. But it's, especially after their disappointing WrestleMania match, the fact that their original at Wrestle Kingdom makes this list probably tells you why us nerdy fans were excited for the WrestleMania match, and it's made the top 10. Which, you look at the other New Japan matches to make this list, maybe give it a watch. If you're a bit let down by the WrestleMania one.
It's in good company. Very good company. And also, I will shout out The Rock versus John Cena. To me, that is sports entertainment perfection. That is the night, I actually wrote about it in my Stories That Defined a Decade column. That is the night that the promise of WrestleMania, the glamour, the celebrity, the glitz, the pageantry, it was all fulfilled in that match. The two, just absolute superstars. That's a phrase that gets used a lot in WWE, but for The Rock versus John Cena, it actually is fitting. These two are superstars in the real meaning of that word. And those two facing at WrestleMania 28 is in my mind, that is sports entertainment perfection. Another one. And also, it was great to have the NXT match, Gargano versus Ciampa, representing, as well as Bayley versus Sasha Banks, as sort of a nod to, where the rise of NXT in the last half of the decade.
Oh, yes, yeah. Awesome list of matches.
Yep, yes. Absolutely. Well, we will wrap it up there. Thank you very much for being with us. Just to wrap it up, match of the decade, The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 26. Who will be the match of the decade for the 2020s? Who knows? Who knows what awaits us?
Well, I've going off anything, it'll be Okada Naito from Wrestle Kingdom.
Maybe it's already happened. Oh, maybe it's already happened. But thank you so much for joining us, everyone who's listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everyone who voted. I love writing for LOP because I love the fan base. I love the people who come in and jump in the comments. As I said, there will be a post on the Lords of Pain main page, which will have all of these results, and you can go in there, you can leave your comments, talk about who you voted for, what you thought of the people who voted, and feel free to come at myself and Imp on social media. I'll let you do your plugs, Imp.
So you can follow me on Twitter at the Damn Implicat. I am live every Thursday on LOP Radio with my Ojo Imp's LOP Radio adventure, just talking about the week of wrestling or whatever. This week, my internet died and didn't come back, and I was really worried. I was like, I can't even contact Sam. Mobile data's not even working. I managed to get through just to send him a message saying, just in case, yeah, it's not my fault. Yeah. So that was a fun night last night, up till about 2 a.m, just with no internet and no sign of it coming back. It's like, how do you even notify somebody on the other side of the world that you can't do a show with them? Possibly, if you don't have internet. Oh, that's crazy. So, yeah, no show this week. But you can follow me. I'm also host of the Aftershock shows currently on LOP Radio, so that's live after every single pay-per-view. The latest one was Wrestle Kingdom. I was joined by Dynamite After Dark and Kingdom of Honors, Jamman and Jeff. So we're live after both Wrestle Kingdom nights, so that's currently up as well. Yeah, every Saturday I post a column about the latest week in wrestling. So that's just everything. That's Monday Night Raw, NXT, AEW, and SmackDown. I'll put like a 4,000 word column up every single Saturday on all of that stuff. Yes, I forced myself to watch that, so you don't all have to. I take the bullet, essentially. It's a lot of wrestling to get through. And I think that might be it, unless I'm used to plugging like 20 million things, but I think that's...
Is there anything else you do? As you know, I'm SirSam on the Lords of Pain main page. You can read my stuff on there. I've been writing a series of stories that defined a decade, so feel free to jump on and read those. I've put a lot of effort in those. They're really big reads. I'm not sure if I will continue the series for the moment. I'm still tossing up whether I continue it or whether I jump back in maybe in a month's time or so, just because they do take a while to write these things, and there's a lot of other things going on in Lords of Pain and in wrestling that I'd love to write about as well. So we'll see. Keep your eyes peeled on the Lords of Pain main page for my work, as you can come at me on Twitter, Sir_Samuel. But yeah, and this is my first LOP radio show. I don't have one to plug, but who knows? Who knows what will happen down the line? How have I done here hosting Imp? Would you have me back? You're in charge of the LOP radio recruits, right?
Oh God, I might be soon. But,
yeah. Well, I'm in charge of the main page now, so I can kick you off if you're not. I can relieve you of your duties.
I would say yes.
You're like, please do.
I would say yes to SirSam being an LOP radio regular. But also, I'm also saying that because I've offered for you to voice over for the YouTube stuff as well, which I just remembered to plug. LOP YouTube, I'm putting work into that as well. If you want to go, at the moment it's just a picture with LOP radio stuff, but the plan is for more, and that's partly why Imp's being kind to Sam. So please do the voice work, Sam.
and don't forget all of the great shows we have on LOP Radio. There will be changes coming in the new year, which is very exciting, nervous and exciting at the same time. So don't forget to tune into those. But thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you next time.
Adios.